Hello. Welcome everybody to the 17th episode of the Love Bomb series. I am joined by my frenemy Kyle from Read by Kyle. We're more friends, I feel like, than we are enemies at this point.
I think we were always friends.
We
You
were
just
always friends.
decided to brand me publicly as your frenemy.
First of all, that is not what happened. You are spreading falsities.
This is actually what happened. I can tell you the exact thing, which you messaged me. We barely knew each other. And you were like, "Hey, do you want to come on my channel and talk about that thing you disagreed with me on briefly?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Sure." And then you just sent me the thumbnail and said frenemies. And I was like, "All right. Guess we're going with it."
I guess it
But
was
thank
an
you for
Alan's
having me.
channel, right? It was an Alan's channel that declaration was made of our Game of Thrones differing opinions. The show specifically.
It was in a thread somewhere, like on Discord.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it was like in Alan's Discord.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I don't remember what Discord.
I feel like it had to have been that or the one that used to be Grimoire, Joanna's.
Yeah.
But either way, we have since become friends. And oddly enough, even though we like to give each other a hard time, a lot of the time we like most of the same things. So
incredibly similar tastes.
Exactly. So it works out pretty well. Hey, Tom. I know
Tom.
this is not typically the night that I have Love Bomb. So if people prefer Mondays, let me know because like no one has anything going on Mondays on the BookTube space. Hey, Evie.
Yeah, this is my fault. I can never do Saturdays, so.
I mean, it happens. But I always ask people, Kyle, what they've been reading and what they've been loving. So you got to tell me what's been good.
Well, I finally started Fool's Fate. Evie's going to be very happy. This is true. This is a factual statement. And I am a little over halfway into Fool's Fate. And like, you know, it's very, I mean, it's Hobb, so it's very good. I have no, it's not like, so the way people talk about Fool's Fate is it like, you know, changes their entire life and they go on like a 6-month hiking in the woods to figure out who they are and their identity and they come out a changed mountain man. I don't have that experience with Fool's Fate yet, but I'm also in the first half. But like, I mean, Hobb is just pretty consistently great. And I'm also reading Song for Our Bone. And I'm like 3 chapters into that and I'm really liking it.
Oh, so you're still at the very beginning.
Yeah, I originally was gonna alternate between the two to try and get like further into both. But then I messaged Derry because I'm trying to get all of Realm of the Elderlings done before Dragonsteel. And
I'm
not super invested in Rainwild. So I went to the Guru. I went to Derry and I was like,
gotta go. That's right.
Can I listen to Dragonhaven while I'm reading Fool's Fate? And I expected her to say no. But instead what she said was she gave me the exact chapter number in Fool's Fate that I could then like there's a spoiler for that chapter in the beginning of Dragonhaven. So she's like, once you get past that chapter, you can listen to Dragonhaven at the same time. So I was like, Derry, you're wonderful. So now I'm trying to speed to get to that part so that I can start listening to Dragonhaven so I can do 2 Hobbs at once. But Songs for Our Bone is also really good.
That's good. Yeah, I really enjoyed, I mean, I've only finished 2 of Kay's books, but the prologues for both of them I thought were excellent. I really enjoyed the prologue for A Song for Our Bone as well as Lions While We're On. Like Lions' prologue is just perfection, but I also enjoyed A Song for Our Bone.
I like the prologue quite a bit. I also really like the prologue to Ghana. I know I don't love that book, and
I liked the prologue too, and then the rest of it was so disappointing because the prologue was so good. And I feel like that's part of the reason is the prologue is just feels very epic in its beginnings, which I mean, like I don't know if I necessarily feel that I would equate the term epic for how I felt for the prologue for Lions or A Song for Our Bun, but it feels big and like majestic, basically, is how I would describe both of those. But I feel like the Tigana one just felt so evocative and then nothing happened. And I was so disappointed. I don't know.
I mean, lots of things do happen in Tigana. Like I know you DNF'd it. It is my least favorite Guy Gavrier K book that I've read.
Yeah.
But there is still lots of strengths to it. It just I think it's his worst. I think it's his worst prose that I've read, actually, which a lot of people disagree with.
I would agree.
And I also think
that I've read. Yeah.
I also think like the sex scenes are ridiculous in that book. And I think the main character sucks. So like to me, I'm like, those are like 3 major differences to the rest.
Win. Yeah. It's really, it's not going to hit the right notes for everybody, but I feel like it's been interesting just listening to people's, hey Hey, how you doing, Rodman? Journey with Kay. Hey, Jay. Yes, we're talking about GDK because I feel like so many people have a different opinion as to what their favorite book of his is, which is really, really great, right? Whereas, like, I feel like for the most part I'll say Sanderson's fandom for the most part, I feel like it's one of 3 books, you know, where I'm like, okay, it's going to be like generally one of these 3, I would think.
Most people's favorite God Give Okay book is Lord of Emperors because that's his best book. Like, unfortunately, like
that is
people
most
not
people's,
choosing that is wrong.
Right? But I mean, like, I know a lot of people who like Lion's the best. A Brightness
Yeah,
Long
Lions.
Ago is a lot of people's favorite. A Song for a Bun is Joanna's favorite.
I don't know
like,
anybody whose favorite is A Brightness Long Ago that has
I think
read
it's
more than a couple. And I love that's my second favorite of his, but I just don't see that as a favorite
someone
very
I
often.
saw recently was saying A Brightness Long Ago was their favorite. Evie, I don't think it was you, but
It was Evie, it is her favorite by default because it's the only one she's
it's the
finished.
only one she's read. But I feel like Ben also was gushing about that book recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great book. I'm
Yeah,
just saying
I
a
mean,
lot of people haven't read it, and I don't know anybody who puts it as their favorite. It's Ben's second favorite after Song for a Bone.
yeah. I'm sorry, Evie. I have not read it yet. I ended up getting carried away with work today, but I will try to get it done tomorrow because we are reading a book a week from the Odyssey. So I need to be better about it. Hey, Britton. Yes, Genghis Khan. GTK in the year. Very well done. Yeah.
Okay, so there's
Yeah.
one person.
There's one. I knew that there was at least one.
I'm not even slandering A Brightness Long Ago. Like, I think it's a perfectly worthy of being someone's favorite. I'm just saying that I
Right.
don't see people say it as a favorite very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just to see though which books resonate with which people. And I feel like for the most part they sort of make sense. Like Joanna and Josh both loving A Song for a Bun makes perfect
Well,
sense.
Josh changed his. His favorite is Lord of Emperors now.
Is it? Well, of course. There you go. Conforming. Hey, Simon,
Yeah,
how you doing?
exactly what Jake said. I think Brightness has the distinction of being read less than the other ones.
Yeah.
I think if more people read it, it would be more people's favorite.
Yeah, it's possible. Better love under heaven then. I hope so, Evie. I hope so.
So what have
But
you been reading? I feel like you've been a bit off lately. You've been
I have
hiding,
been a little bit
binging Sarah
off.
J. Maas.
Yeah, I have been. But I haven't reread her now in a month. So, you know, there's that. I decided to try reading my bookshelves and library books until the end of the year. That's pretty much my goal, except for Wind and Truth. And I can't remember if there was another book that I ordered. I also have joined a book club. So if I can't find a book from the library for my book club, I'll probably go out and buy it. But other than that, I'm trying to read my shelves. So I just started reading Danielle L. Jensen, and I actually really like her as an author, which has been really great.
I've never heard of this author.
So she published traditionally this year a romantasy called The Fate Inked in Blood, which is a Viking romantasy, which I enjoyed. And then she has previously independently published 2 series, one of which has 5 books in them, but it's 2 duologies and I think a standalone within this universe. And I really liked book 1 because I liked the concept of the world that she created. And it's just nice when you come across a new author that you enjoy. And the book that I had to read for my book club was a book by Julia Whalen called Thank You for Listening. And she is...
Oh, I started that.
I loved it. I really, really loved
yeah?
it. Yeah. Also because I find she's very reminiscent in her storytelling to Emily Henry. And I love Emily Henry, so I enjoyed that. But I also listened to the books, which because like it's Julia Whalen, I couldn't not listen
she's
to
an
the
audio
books.
narrator. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't get any further had nothing to do with the book. I just had 6 or 7 library
I got
books
it.
at once, and I was just like, one of these has to go, and I'm not that interested in listening to it, so I
That's
just
fair.
returned it.
That's honestly totally fair. But I really enjoyed that. And then I went and I read her other book, which is called My Oxford Year. And that one ended up being much more emotionally devastating than I previously realized going into it. I thought it was going to be like a light, happy read, and it was not that. It was still very good, but it was highly emotionally charged. So I feel like I've been trying to kind of just find things that bring me joy lately have been the big things. Kyle, read Finavar, be a GTK completionist, and then you can tell me what is good enough to read.
I DNF Finavar, so maybe
Did
one
you?
day.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, I thought it was mid.
Yeah, every book is not going to work for everybody, but at the beginning of the month, as you know, I finished The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which I actually ended up really enjoying, which is nice.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about that because I have not watched your video and I keep meaning to. So I actually don't know any of your opinions on it besides your rating. So
Okay,
do you want to
so
tell me what you thought?
I really enjoyed it for the most part. I felt like the second half was much stronger than the first half. I
Yeah.
felt like I was when the book started, I thought I had a very clear idea of where it was going, and then it definitely didn't go that way. So that was okay with me. But the thing that stuck out for me the most in the book is how he wrote female characters, because I actually loved it. And one of the major things I was talking about was I feel like in most of the epic fantasy that I have read, there have been a few exceptions where I think the females have been written well. I feel like Stormlight is a good example for the most part. Shalon in book one, as most people know, I do not think is a well-written character, but she becomes such an excellent character later on that it's fine. But Gia's character arc for me in The Grace of Kings was excellent. I absolutely loved it. And I liked seeing how she really evolves from this like child, not necessarily a child, but she's younger, right? And then how she evolves through married life, motherhood, separation from her spouse, and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah, so Gia is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, she's great.
I think you're gonna love the rest of the series.
Yeah.
So the most common criticisms I hear of Grace of Kings is that the first half is really slow. Yeah, I know this is funny. I speak so fast. I don't know what
I
my
don't
problem is.
think I speak that fast, but apparently I do. I'm so sorry.
Is that and then like that it there's like a lot of distance to the characters. And I think that is like pretty well not like solved, but like it's much better in the next books because
Mhm.
Grace of Kings is kind of telling like an overarching pulled back
Right.
view, and then afterwards it's a different writing style kind of, and you get way more into the nitty gritty of the stuff. And I think like for my money, I think Ken Liu writes female characters better than any other like male fantasy author that I've
I
ever
honestly
read.
would agree. I've been thinking about it pretty in-depthly since reading the book, and I have a very strong inclination that Gia is gonna turn real bad. Like that's my gut feeling. And I
Um,
honestly like I'm okay with it because I'm anticipating that there's gonna be like some kind of blood feud coming up in the upcoming books, which is like fine.
okay.
But I honestly really can't think of other characters that I was as interested in from book one as I was with Gia. Like, I really loved Yasna in Stormlight
Mhm.
Archive, but we don't get a Yasna POV. So I felt like it wasn't as strong of a connection as I had with Gia. And yeah, I just, obviously, if people know, I don't like Wheel of Time. So, and those characters don't work for me. I speak so freaking fast. I'm
You
surprised
do
by
speak
this, guys.
fast. Yeah, no,
I'm
you
so
do.
sorry.
But
I
it's
think I
okay. Like
speak
I
at a
speak
normal pace.
really fast. Yeah.
Maybe it's a Canadian thing. We just speak quickly.
Well, I was born in the States. I would have learned my
That's
speech
true.
patterns in America.
That is true. But
What I was
yeah.
gonna say is when I was reading Speaking Bones, and I want to say this vaguely just to like not influence. I was reading Speaking Bones, and I realized for like 350 pages of that book, I was basically reading about like different women in different roles of power and different like roles in society, all like doing different things to like
Yeah.
further their goal. And I was like, it wasn't like overhead. It wasn't like the Marvel scene where it's just like we're all gonna like it was like
Yeah.
organic. And I
Hmm.
and I realized I was like, this is like maybe one of the most feminist books that I've ever read because
Yeah.
it is not trying to beat you over the head with like, look at what women can do. It is just like naturally part of the way the world evolved and where these characters evolved.
Yes.
And like, I only noticed it because I realized I was like, every POV that I've like that's been important for the last little while has been like a female
Yeah.
perspective, and it felt seamless. And I just think that's so impressive. And a lot of people like so okay, so the worst review of all time is the thank you, Tom. The worst review of all time is the one of the top reviews for Grace of Kings. I think
Hmm.
finally Petrick Petrick's review has pushed it off the very top, which thank you, Petrick, for life. But it's like a 2-star review that I hate with my whole heart. Okay. And the person's like, the reason I hate this book is where are all the women? This is just a big bro and like all this stuff.
What?
And I'm like, I think your reading comprehension was bad because there is not that much women, like if you're just per page in Grace of Kings, like that is a for sure a thing to point out. But the way that it's written about these women, like you can see the undercut of what he's trying to do. And there's literally a scene where like someone's like, hey, what if he's like, I really need help doing a thing. And then somebody's like, what if you recruited all these women who are like dying to help in some way? And he's like, I guess I never thought of that. And then the whole narrative is like, why wouldn't you consider that? That's stupid. And then he's like, you're right. So like, there's literally like in the scene or in the book, like very feminist theme. So I just don't understand that criticism at all. And it was like a very popular review. So I'm glad people have,
honestly, because I think what is so well done about it is that because it's historical fantasy, and I will argue that it is historical fantasy, he didn't necessarily alter the role of women all that much for the time period in which like this type of story would take place. And I liked that. It was showing what women were able to do with the confines of what they were given, but also be able to maneuver within those positions and how they could finagle themselves into better positions. And I liked that aspect of it a lot. I thought that that was integral to the story. So that for me, no, I'm not going to agree with that.
Can you highlight Jake's comment? So this is actually the worst one. I forgot about this one. And this ties into what I was just going to tell you about like the historical fantasy, which is that the book is essentially a retelling of a time period, like the Chuhan contention. And to a point that it's like, if you just like blacked out the names and a lot of the stuff would be like exactly the same. And then obviously he fills in all like different details and like the personal stuff. But somebody has a review of this just being like, Ken Liu plagiarized. And then like that's the top. And then you go further down and he's like a history book. And that's like the legitimate criticism is that like Sima Qian's like records of the time or whatever.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So like that's where you like it would be like if you plagiarized like Suetonius's 12 Caesars or something because you like it was insane. So yeah, that's actually the dumbest review of it.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Evie, I'm aware that Dara is not real. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean I agree with Evie that it's not historical fantasy, but I get like it's but
inspired,
also yeah, the second book like starts as how history would have started from that point on. And then it takes a very sharp left. Yeah. And then everything else in the series is like fully just Ken Liu's brain, which is awesome.
Yeah. You can figure out some of what's going to happen in, Grace of Kings if you know Chinese history. Exactly.
Just like I would say roughly the first half, Daniel, is like pretty close to Chinese history still. Like it's, well, not first half, but a bunch of it. There's still some stuff. Yes,
I would make this argument, Evie.
Cain and Abel.
I'm not a fan of John Steinbeck, as you know. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Steinbeck at all.
Oh my god, I
yeah, not for me.
What have you tried? Like just East of Eden?
Of Mice of Men, and that's it. I hated it so much. It was a high school read. So
wait. You've just read a 100-page novella.
That's it. And I hate it.
And then you decided you're done with the author forever.
Done. It's one of the only times that I have read something by someone and I have thought, I will never pick up something by them again and I will be okay with that decision.
I'm pretty sure we're way more on the enemy's side of the frenemies thing now.
That's fine. No, I had a visceral reaction while reading that book.
What didn't you like about it?
Literally everything. There was nothing I liked about that book.
But like, what is your, okay, so here's the thing. So I felt that way about Catcher in the Rye. And I know this is a love bomb, so I'm not going to go into like hating on things I hate. Yeah. But I really don't like Catcher in the Rye. And so when people tell me why, like, they're like, why don't you like Catcher in the Rye? I start explaining it to them. And they're like, that's not like really what the book is about. But I just have like a visceral hatred reaction to it that I don't remember. I'm just like, I hate, he's talking about ducks. And he just says like phony all the time. So like, what is your perception of Mice and Men?
My perception from what I remember is mostly the relationship between the two characters and just, you know, the time period in which the book was written, basically. And there was a lot going into this. I mean, that's true, Evie. So we'll call
That's
it
bait.
even. That's
bait.
true. We'll call it even. But I remember really just liking the language used in the book. I never felt at any point that I was connected to either one of the characters. And of course, like this big dramatic thing happens at the end, and I did not care. And I felt like by that point, I needed to have cared. And it just, I never felt like that connection ever. So yeah, it wasn't for me.
And you're like not good with animal death either. So like that would have.
No.
I really want my wife to read Of Mice and Men. But it's really difficult, like trying to convince her to read it, and then also somebody almost spoiled the rabbit stuff. And like, I mean, my wife really loves rabbits, so I was like, don't tell her that part. Like,
yeah, no. I mean, that's the thing. Like, nothing worked for me. So I mean, I respect the fact that other people like it, as I do with a lot of other books. You know, like there's tons of books that we read all the time that, as we know, just because a book doesn't resonate with you doesn't mean that it's going to not resonate with a ton of other people.
That's all totally fair. But writing off the rest of John Steinbeck.
I know. I can't do it.
It was 100 pages. That would be like reading the first 100 pages of Stormlight and then just being like, I'll never. Yeah, but that's because you were in high school. You were forced to read it. I think
I will never get those 100 pages back, Kyle.
I think you need to talk about this in therapy to somebody.
I mean,
John Steinbeck hurt you.
I had my therapy today, so I clearly missed out on an opportunity to lament my reading of John Steinbeck in the 9th grade.
Next time, yeah. That'll be my first session. I'll just be like, Catcher in the Rye. Just sit down. Catcher in the Rye.
That's it, right? Like that year was that, and then back to back was Flowers for Algernon. It was a heavy time, and I was just like, why are we reading all these books in the 9th grade? Like, it was just,
your grade 9 teacher really wanted to upset you people.
Yeah, it was not a great time. And like,
did you like Flowers for Algernon?
I didn't hate it, but obviously, like, because it's such an emotional book, it's one that I read and I will never, like, I've never felt the need to reread it type thing. It's, you know, horrifying in a lot of ways. I feel like it's beautifully written. The story is tragic and breaks your heart. And I experienced it, and I don't need to experience it again, is basically how I feel.
I read it this year, and it's one of my favorite books this year. But I listened to it on audio.
Okay. I wonder how different that would be.
I think I want to reread it physically at some point, because there's a lot of like, you see him getting more intelligent with the spelling and grammar and stuff. And I lost that aspect of it. But I did really like that book. Yeah. It's very devastating.
That's the thing. I never really thought about it in that way, just because at that point in my life when I read it, audiobooks weren't really a thing. Like, you know, you might have like a book on tape, but that was basically it. But yeah, watching the actual transformation on the page of the lettering changing and all that kind of stuff, like, you feel like you're evolving with the character, and then to kind of see that rescind back into what it was just awful. So yeah, it was really hard.
Yeah, it's a rough book. That's a book where, like, so I mean, the whole book is like sad, but everybody's like, oh, it makes me cry, and like, I cry pretty easily in books. Like, I'm not like a hard person to make cry. I've become
that in the last year. I don't know what has happened to me, but it's like my exterior hard shell has broken, and I look at something sad in a book now and I'm like, settle in. You know?
Yeah, I don't know, something changes in you, I guess. But
yeah,
I was 2 pages from the end, and I hadn't cried or even come close to crying. And I was like, yeah, this book is just like generally a downer, but like, I don't know what makes people cry. And I think the last like 3 paragraphs of that book are like so like depth of soul sad that I just had to, like, I literally, as I stopped the book, I just sat there and cried. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Cause
I cried with that book as a teenager. There were 2 books that made me cry as a teenager, and they were both for school. And it was that one, and Ethan Frome was the other one. And again, like, overly depressing and horrible, but like also tragically beautiful, like that type of thing, where it's, you know, just life kind of throwing all the bad things at you and trying to find like some semblance of beauty in the few moments that you can. But both of them, were pretty devastating. So
what is the first book, like, you said like about a year ago it changed for you? Like, was there like a really impactful book that made you cry?
It was this year, so it hasn't even been a year.
Okay.
You're gonna laugh at me, but it was a Sarah J. Maas book. It was the 5th book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Silver Flames, and it deals very heavily with essay. And a female character is relaying her experience to 2 characters that they have built this. It's broken women, basically, like trying to overcome what has broken them in their lives. And it's her finally feeling comfortable enough to share her story with these 2 other women. And like, just, I listened to it, and I think that also played a factor into it. I don't know if I would have had the same reaction on the page, but the narrator
I find people are normally opposite. That's interesting.
It is opposite normally, but the narrator did such a phenomenal job that you could just hear the anguish in her voice. And I was like, every woman knows someone that's been touched by essay. So it felt very personal. Mm-hmm. And I sat back and just cried and thought, what kind of world we live in, basically, and all that, and kind of lamented that as a mother to a young daughter and all that type of stuff. And it just hit me in a way that honestly, like, a fantasy book has not hit me before. And I know a lot of people like to give shit to Sarah J. Maas, and a lot of the time it's warranted, whatever. But the one thing that I will say that I think she does phenomenally well is she handles grief and trauma really, really well. And I think that she hit her stride with it, especially in that 5th book. And when I ended up rereading it a few months later, and I had the same reaction when I got to that scene, I was like, this is just, for me, a powerful scene. And that kind of unleashed the floodgates, because since then it's been a few different things. Yeah. And then I read Happy Place by Emily Henry this year, which, like, ironically is named Happy Place. And I cried 5 times reading that book.
The book isn't sad.
So it is sad in that it's also, again,
it's melancholy. I would describe it.
It's melancholy, but it's the dealing with grief. And that for me was what really triggered it, I guess. And I think it was more, I related very deeply to the main character in that book as someone who had a very singular goal for their entire life, to kind of get to that point and go, oh, this isn't maybe what I was hoping this was going to be. And for the main character in Happy Place, it's medicine. And then for me in my life, it was academia. And that...
No, I could totally see that.
Yeah, and it struck such a chord with me, just because I don't feel like I had actually grieved my departing from academia. And really, like, it was my only focus for 20 years, of education. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be a collegiate professor. That's going to be my career. And to walk away from that and go, oh no, it's not, like, this is not what I was anticipating this was going to be, and kind of letting that part of your soul go. It's learning to come to grips with your identity in a way that you haven't really contemplated before until you're, like, fully facing it, I guess. And I really loved how Harriet kind of is in the throes of that in that book, but also the blurred lines of what grief can look like when your partner loses a family member, but they're not your family, even though they are your family. And what that looks like. I just thought it was, for me, it's one of my 5 books of the year. Like, I loved Happy Place, and everything hit the right notes for me in that book. So.
Yeah, that's awesome that happened. Like, it allowed you to experience that.
Yeah,
in a way that was great. Like, cathartic. I read Happy Place, and I liked it better than Book Lovers.
Me too.
I think it did a lot of stuff right. Like, I liked a lot about the book. I just think that, like, romance books are just, like, they have a ceiling for me of how much I'm going to enjoy them.
For sure. I get that.
So I gave it 3 stars, but, like, it was like a positive 3 stars. I thought the character writing was really good. I thought Happy Place was also very funny. And yeah, like the like, I don't know if it's moral or, like, just the character conundrums were very realistic and, like, were resolved in realistic ways. But then, it would just be, like, pages upon pages of her being like, oh, he touched my arm. Did he mean to touch my arm? And I'm like, I mean, I know that's, like, like, I'm not taking it, like, I don't think that was poorly done, because that's what part of the book. But I am just like, can we get back to the being sad about our lives part?
I completely
But I will say, and to what you were saying about grieving academia, this is very different. You devoted, a large portion of your life to doing that, and that is something that like having to take away or being taken away from that either voluntarily or not would have a big effect on you. But something recently happened to me that like I like kind of similarly where I was at a concert and like I love concerts. I like more recently, you know, I'm more into books, but until like, you know, the last 4 years or so, my whole life was like music. Like I would just go and like listen to new music and like all the time. When people saw me on the street and they hadn't seen me for a while, the first thing they would say is like, "Been to any good concerts lately?" Like it's just always like I've been to like 180 concerts. And I was at a concert recently, and it was at a Pantera concert, which was a good concert. Like I did like it, and I was sitting there, and I just was like kind of bored during it.
Yeah.
And I realized that this has happened for like the last 3 or 4 concerts. And I just was like, and I used to like when I was sitting like in between bands, I would always like make friends with the people around me. I'd ask them like what their favorite bands were like. And now I would just like, as soon as the band would be over, I would go on my phone and read because I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for the band. And I just like got really sad while I was at the concert. And I was just like, this is like, I've changed. Like, it was the first time I realized I was like, this is still like something that I think is cool sometimes, but it's not. For so long, it was like my identity that I was like, you know, I went on a concert road trip and I saw 37 concerts in 42 days or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, I like toured the whole Midwest going to a concert every day. And now I'm just like, what if I stayed home and read my book? And I had just never really consciously noticed that my identity had changed in that firm of a way. And like, just like, it was weird it was happening while like, you know, like Pantera was talking about like, you know, beating somebody up or whatever. But I was just like, wow. And so, yeah, I totally get from that like emotional perspective, how that needed to be something that you dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's cool that Emily Henry allowed you to do it.
Emily Henry is my girl, honestly. And that for me has been what's really fascinating for me about liking contemporary romance is that specifically with Emily Henry, with that each of her protagonists, for the most part, I have found something within myself that is relatable to those characters. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's a negative. And I've been like, ooh, I don't really like that in somebody. And I'm like, but I kind of do that. So maybe that's something to look at. But yeah, it was Happy Place for me was just a really interesting reading experience because it was one of those things that, first of all, I think that was the one that really solidified for me that I am open to the genre. And I think it showed me just how strong character work can be in different genres too. Because I think my brain had kind of decided because we get to spend so much more time with our characters in fantasy novels, right? And I think that that's just due to the fact that the books are so much longer than most other genres. And I found it really incredible that Emily Henry does what some authors do in 800 pages for me in 300 pages. And I was like, that's pretty incredible. And yeah, it was a really cathartic experience for me. And seriously, 5 times of crying, and not just like little crying. There was one point I had to stop the book because I was crying so hard that I couldn't hear anything anymore. And I was like, this is a problem. And that's when I messaged Yolanda and Evie and I was like, you guys need to read this book. And they did, which was great. So yeah, but it was good.
That's good. Listen, a good crying experience is what. Have you read Sword of Kaigen yet?
I haven't, but I'm really excited to read it. Yeah, it's
that book made me cry a lot of times. Like probably 5 times. Okay. And my wife read it, and I had told like she knew that I like when I read it, I was like, oh, this book made me cry a lot. And then like later on, I had her read it, and then like she was reading it, and then like she got to the end, she's like, that book was really good. I was like, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it was like really good. Like I liked it. Like it was really good. And I was like, are you emotionally devastated? She's like, yeah, it was sad. And I was like, what do you mean it was sad? And she's like, and her exact quote was, I'm a hard ass bitch. And I was like, whoa. Because she went into it trying to not cry. So she didn't cry. And I was like, I feel like if she just didn't know that but anyway, that book was very sad, but in like a good way. It's a very, very good book.
I almost feel like that's kind of how I used to be as a reader in that, for certain series and authors, I do have a protective mechanism. Like specifically with George R.R. Martin, I go into that knowing that I am going to be emotionally devastated at points, and I just accept that and move on. But I feel like now I almost enjoy it more going into it and allowing myself to be emotionally vulnerable. And I feel like it pulls something out extra of the experience that I can then look back on that book and say, oh, that evoked that specific emotion from me for this exact reason. And yes, I'm a hard ass bitch. Kyle's wife. But I just reread Pure Nasty for our book club this month. And it was interesting because I read the physical copy last year for the first time. And I chose to do audio this go around.
Audiobook's fantastic.
Incredible. It was so good.
I can never say his name.
I can never say his name.
Chitowell Ejiofor. I've heard it said before.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's
brilliant actor.
It's pretty close. Yeah. But it was so good. And I mean, the first time that I went through it, I think I was so caught up in the mystery of what was happening. And then this time, knowing everything, I kind of just allowed myself to be completely immersed with the character. And it was an incredible experience. Like, that book is just, I'll be gushing about it in a couple weeks. Yeah, it's the best.
So as somebody who also read the book physically first and then listened, was it a little like, I think the audiobook is excellent. Was it a little jarring hearing this like deep voice for Pure Nessie? Because I envisioned Pure Nessie extremely differently, and then I just couldn't help but picture it as like Chitowell Ejiofor.
Sure.
Sorry for mispronouncing it. And that was just so different from my initial interpretation that it was also just interesting to like then reimagine the character.
Right.
As someone looking.
Yeah. What's stranger for me, I think, is that I didn't associate him as being in my brain as being English. So when I was listening to the book, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. But I think that was probably for me the most jarring thing. But I think I get what you're saying though, because when you start the book, you almost feel like he has kind of maybe more a voice of an adolescent than.
Yeah, I pictured him very like high strung and like whimsical, almost like. I don't know how to explain. Like, I feel like there's like a character somewhere that he reminded me of, but I can't think of who. But yeah,
but I loved that book.
We're gonna read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell in November.
We are, yeah,
that'll be exciting. I have been pushing that book back for so long. Like every time it pops up as my audiobook on Libby, I hit like wait 30 days. And I just checked recently and it was like March 12th, 2022 that I put a hold on it. So I'm just been waiting 2 years.
Yeah, I need to put a hold on it. I haven't decided if I'm going to do physical or audio. The one thing I will say is that when I read the physical of Pure Nessie, and again, I don't know if this is because it was the first read through or if this was just the difference of reading it physically versus audio, I found that the physical read through was much more atmospheric for me than the audiobook. And I don't know if that is stylistically what she does also in Jonathan Strange. So I'm torn as to which way I want to go with it, but we'll see. If I can snag both.
I always just feel it out. Sometimes like I don't feel the audiobook as much. Sometimes it's just great to immersion read. I find that's when I get the most atmosphere out of a book.
Yeah, for sure.
If I'm being honest, I don't really read with atmosphere in mind. So
I normally don't either.
Really the biggest concern for me.
I normally don't either. And I think that's why I was so taken back by Pure Nessie. Like I actually dreamed about that book for weeks after I finished it, just because I felt so connected to the atmosphere that was created. And I remember I would wake up and I would say to Josh, I was like, I dreamt about this book again. You know, it was like day 5 and just could not get it out of my head. So yeah, I'm curious to see how I feel about it.
That reminds me, a couple of days ago, I'm just going to type in private chat who this character is. Not that it's a big spoiler, but just to be super spoiler specific or off. But I had a dream that this character in the private chat died in the like preview chapters for Wind and Truth. Like I was having a dream, and I guess at the dream, I was like at Dragonsteel, and I was reading like the next chapter after the preview chapters, and that character died, and I just burst into tears at Dragonsteel, and then I woke up thinking that was real, and I was like, oh, that's never happened to me before. Like I don't dream take spoilers in my books, but
So I have been recently getting more back into reading physical books because I finally got my new glasses and I can actually read now.
Oh,
And
nice.
I have been noticing that I am not that person that reads and gets tired. I'm the opposite. I read and get amped up and then want to keep going. And then it's 2 a.m. and then I'm exhausted the next day. But I have been noticing the last few weeks that I have been dreaming these insane dreams because I have been so immersed in my book before I go to bed that it just carries through into my dream. So yeah, it's been fun, but also exhausting.
That never happens to me. Even like if I listen to an audiobook before I go to sleep, it never happens to me. But sometimes TV shows will happen. Like if I've watched a lot of a TV show in a day, that will happen
I've had that with video games also. I had it with World of Warcraft.
Oh, I've had it so much with video games. I'll have like weird dreams where like I'll like merge StarCraft with like my job, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So dreams are weird.
Oh yeah, super super weird. But how are you feeling about Wind and Truth? Are you feeling confident?
Yes and no. So okay. So I don't want to weird anybody or like worry anybody because I told this to Bookborn and she got all worried and I'm like, this is not a worry. I and several other people, Jake has noticed it, Jimmy's noticed it, a few other people have noticed a dip in the writing quality. Now, when I say that, I don't think that it's suddenly just written by a toddler. I just feel like there's more clunky things in the 300 pages that I've read that I'm just like, this was not like. I just feel like previous Sanderson would have written this a little bit better or a little bit more tight or less obvious or just like there's a little bit more like juvenileness to some of the moments. And I don't know if, now to be fair, with the whole book's context, that might be because he's trying to make things lighter in the beginning because the second half gets really dark. Like that's possible. But a couple of us have mentioned it and we've all kind of noticed it to some degree. Okay. But the actual events going on and like the stuff that's being set up and like so many of the scenes were really good. Like one of the scenes made me tear up just from the previews. I think there's super interesting lore things happening. So it's not like I think like the book is going to hit for me. Like it's going to be 5 stars. Like there's no way it's not going to be. I'm more concerned that if he's doing this in a series where I'm noticing it in something like Stormlight, I'm concerned for the Elantris sequels and Mistborn Era 3 and onwards because he has to rebuild my investment in those. And I don't think I'm suddenly going to be like, oh, Mistborn Era 3, 3 stars. Like I think he's a competent enough author and he does enough of what I like that I'm always going to like it. But I am in the back of my head wondering if Stormlight 5 might be the last high point or the last high point for a long time for me.
It's interesting you say this because I started reading the sample chapters and I thought the exact same thing. So I find that interesting.
Yeah, and like the thing is I'm so happy. I've never been more happy that I did a reread. Because I read Way of Kings 4 years ago, and then I binged all of the Cosmere.
Yeah.
And I've reread like a couple Sanderson books, but in that time I've read so many other books. And so if I didn't reread and I felt this way about Stormlight 5, I would have just convinced myself that my tastes have changed. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not liking Sanderson as much. But I'm literally rereading Rhythm of War while I was reading those sample chapters, and I just reread Oathbringer. So I'm like, I know how the writing is in those books.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is different. So I'm glad that I now have the confidence in the fact that I don't dislike those books more. That I just like something has changed in his writing style.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Obviously, I read them close to a year ago now, and Way of Kings was about a year and a half ago since I read it. But I friggin' love Oathbringer, as you know. Like Oathbringer, I think is an incredible book. And I honestly I enjoyed Rhythm of War. For me, it was still a really good read. I know a lot of people have their issues with Rhythm of War, but I really, really loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I'm excited to skip the flashbacks, but other than that, it's going to be dope.
Yeah. The flashbacks for me were probably the biggest issue for that book for me. But other than that, like super, super.
Also, like there's a little bit of stuff in the flashbacks that are good to like know for lore and backstory purposes, but I don't need to re-experience them. So like I feel comfortable just skipping them. And I'm like, oh, that'll like help the pacing.
Tom says don't worry about all the
Tom the
Cosmere
Doomer in general, he says.
in general.
So I actually like where the Cosmere is headed. Like if we're talking about like, the stuff we've gotten in the future and like the wars between the shards and the planets and stuff, or potentially, I don't even, we're assuming it's going to be a war. Who knows?
Sure.
I think all that stuff is super cool. And I love the idea of like starting it off as like a bunch of fantasy series that become a meta sci-fi series. Like all of that works for me. And I don't foresee myself in 5 years being like, oh yeah, I don't like Sanderson anymore. I just foresee like a bunch of 4-star reads in my future if this trend continues, and I hope that it doesn't. So
yeah, I'm curious to see. I worry if he's gonna hit burnout, and I feel like he feels he's got to keep pumping out books, and I want him to know he can take his time.
I don't think he'll be burned out. Anytime you listen to the man, like his wife goes away for a day to visit her mom or something, and he pumps out a new novella. So he's totally fine on that side. I do think he's talked about Stormlight 5 being hard to write a lot of times. He said it was really exhausting.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much he followed it, but they gave him Tor told him the maximum amount of pages he could do. And then he came back and had like an extra 25 pages. And he's like, we'll figure it out. And they just like changed the margins and move some images around to make it fit. And so I feel like he made the book like as big as it like he literally possibly could. And I just think it took a lot out of him. So maybe he needs to like give himself more time with Stormlight releases, but I mean, it's gonna be like 9 years till we get another Stormlight book, so I don't want him to do that.
Right. I mean, in general, though, I'm hoping that it doesn't equate to a quality dip everywhere type thing. Answer Brian, because the answer is yes. Tress, you should definitely read.
I don't know if Brian will like Tress as much. Like Tress is a really good book. I foresee him liking Sunlit Man more.
I agree. I just started Sunlit Man, and I think he would like it.
And I don't know. Yumi might be a little. I'm specifically thinking about the humor and Tress as the turn off for Brian, and I'm just guessing. But I think all 3 of the Cosmere novels are good. Sunlit Man was my least favorite, but I think Sunlit Man will go up more on rereads.
I just restarted it because I had started it earlier in the year and didn't finish, and I want to read it before Wind and Truth. So I restarted it yesterday, and I will say that I enjoyed the first chapter more this time than I did last time. I don't know if it's just because I wasn't in the right mood for it.
Yeah, and that happens. Without like saying it for anybody who doesn't want to know, do you know who the main character of Sunlit Man is?
I do.
Okay. I knew that like ahead of time, and I think somebody just maybe spoiled it for me, or I don't know what the deal was, but I went into the book knowing who it was. And then like I remember when Jake was reading it, he was like figuring it out as he went.
Sure,
and I was
it's
like,
a different
did everybody
experience.
just not know? And I was like, to me, so on chapter 1, I was already invested because I knew who the character was.
Right.
So I feel like maybe if you don't know starting off, that it like takes a little bit longer. But I think chapter 10 is where that book gets more interesting.
Really takes off. See, for me, that was kind of how I was with Yumi. Yumi for me was a slower build, and I think it was just because Tress was such a like I loved Tress from the beginning because I love Princess Bride, and it was very reminiscent of Princess Bride. So Brian, I think the question is if you like Princess Bride, you will probably like Tress and the Emerald Sea. But I don't necessarily think Yumi would be a hit for Brian. I think it would probably be, like you said, Sunlit Man, maybe then
The reason I'm unsure about Yumi is that Brian reads a lot of lit RPG, which is not similar to, but a lot of lit RPG is like anime inspired. And so is Yumi. So like depending on your exposure to anime, Brian, you might like it more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Very much that feel for Yumi. Like, I was thinking about it yesterday when I was flipping through Sunlit Man, just in terms of the artwork, because for me, Sunlit Man's artwork is the one I like the least of the secret projects.
Less than Frugal Wizard?
Well, the thing I like about Frugal Wizard so much is all the margin stuff and how there's basically like the 2 stories. So I feel like that for me ups it enough that it's that. But I mean more so of like the Cosmere novels. Because I would honestly probably put Frugal Wizard and Sunlit Man on par with each other, because I really like the end, not for in terms of quality, I'm saying in terms of the artwork.
Oh, okay,
but I would say that the end, I really like the end pages in Sunlit Man, but then the interior artwork is just very Soviet feeling for me, which like I know is intentional basically, but like for me it just doesn't hit the right way. But Yumi's artwork, was so gorgeous.
Yumi's
So
artwork
gorgeous.
is great, and I just have to say, if you don't like that artwork and that lovely, gorgeous Sunlit Man behind you, you can send it to me because I'll appreciate that artwork in all of its glory.
Yes, it's fine.
I
Some are better than others. Some are better than others.
So I have Tress, but I want to get Yumi and Sunlit Man, but I'm hoping they just have them at Dragonsteel because shipping to Canada
they will.
sucks.
He said that they'll have them. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then I'm just gonna buy them there, and then I don't have to worry about shipping, which is just beautiful.
Right. Did you sign up for the 5th project or whatever?
I just did the ebook. I don't need to sight unsee this kind of stuff. I just want to read it, and then I'll decide later.
That's fair.
Especially because
that one.
When I made the decision to not get the secret projects the first time, there was no, like, we didn't know they would still be available 2 years later.
Yeah.
So I was like, I made the decision then, this is too expensive. I'll just experience this through ebooks.
Sure.
But now I know that they keep them on sale. So it's like, there's no benefit to me doing this before I've read it. Because what if it's a Frugal Wizard? I don't think it will be based on the I actually am incredibly hyped for it based on the preview. It sounds fun. Camper. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I really like the art and stuff, I'll buy it after.
Yeah, I think that so for me, they announced that Kickstarter and I hadn't read any Sanderson yet. I was gearing up to start reading him that December and was like, well, I'm not investing in something if I don't know if I like the author. So, and then of course I ended up binging the Cosmere last year and loved it and thought, well, shit, I can't believe I missed this. But yeah, like you, I was super happy to see, okay, I can actually semi-participate now in this like second wave of it, which was still really fun. But yeah, it was good.
What makes me really mad, but also in a good way, is I got this really nice edition of Sword of Kaigen, which I think is beautiful. It's actually in there quite well, so I'm not going to grab it. But you know, the one everybody's seen.
Yeah.
And then they're coming out with a new one, and the new one's beautiful. Laura, it's beautiful. Like I think I like it more than this one, and this one's a more expensive one, so I have to get that one too. So I'm gonna have 4 copies of Sword of Kaigen, and that's too many copies.
I don't know if you follow her channel, Elliot Brooks, but she just did a video of comparing special editions.
I do follow Elliot Brooks,
and she did a comparison of Sword of Kaigen special editions, which I thought both were beautiful.
Well, there's a third, so she couldn't have done the new one because it's not out yet. But she did the one with the many colors, right?
Yeah,
with the sun and stuff. Yes. That one is also nice. I almost got that one too, but that one was from the UK, so the shipping was a bit crazier.
Yes. I just saw a comment.
Derry, I was shouting you out earlier, like about Fool's Fate.
Hey, Derry. Yes. I'm happy therapy went well. How is Sword of Kaigen?
Sword of Kaigen is one of my favorite books of all time. It has a very unique structure, some of the best character writing I've ever read, and it is perfectly demonstrating of the pros and cons of self-pub, because if it had been traditionally published, my belief is that an editor would have made her cut some of the things that make that book so good, but they also would have made her do things like, hey, maybe don't have like a classroom setting in chapter 2 where they just info dump the entire history of the world as a history lesson. And like maybe the last chapter could use some editing, and maybe we don't invent units of time and we just say minutes and hours, like things like that. So there's like little things about Sort of Kaigen that I'm like this is a mistake, like this is a bad idea. And that's like the beauty of self-pub, is that like she was able to do this like unique, incredible story that I don't think would have gotten published. But she also like just needed somebody else to just be like, do we really need to replace the word minutes? Could we just like have the word minutes? So but super good novel.
I have pretty much decided in the last couple of days that I'm most likely going to be self-pubbing my book for very similar reasons to that, mostly word count, in which like I don't want to cut things of my book to make it a poorer novel so I can meet trad word count standards, as opposed to actually telling the story that I would like to tell. But
that's awesome.
I
think there's pros and cons to both routes. So that's
There really
cool.
are. There really are.
I do want to ask you about your book because when you first told me about it, I thought you were writing a sci-fi or something, and then you switched to romantasy.
I did. So the first book that I wrote, I have 80% done. But I hit a wall with it, and I was just going, God, I can't figure this out. Basically, it is a satirical sci-fi fantasy. It's like a melange of things, but it is the basic premise is an academic is struggling to find a job. She is an expert in Arthurian lore and legend. She goes into a university for an interview and finds out that she has in fact been interviewed by an alien dictator who creates his own version of the hunt for the Holy Grail.
I have to stop you right there. Off.
Yes.
Have you read The Magicians?
No, I have not.
Are you aware that The Magician starts pretty similarly to this?
No, I am not.
I
know nothing about that series.
The Magicians is bad, but the very beginning, he's like on his way to a Princeton interview, and he just accidentally gets taken to an interview with a magic school, and they're like, "Surprise,
this isn't accidental. This is very intentional that they were like seeking her out for this interview at this school because she's the only one that they trust with Arthurian knowledge." And
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and the dictator basically is so enamored by King Arthur that he's trying to emulate him, except he's a dictator and like a mass murderer of these worlds and stuff. And he decides that of the 150 planets that he wishes to conquer, that's probably too much, but 147 is okay. So he creates this hunt for the Holy Grail on these different planets and different worlds and stuff. And it's basically the story of my academic trying to figure out how to guide him and save people, and then the POVs of the people that are being forced into this competition. But yeah, it was an event. I really enjoyed writing it. I think it's fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting premise. So I was just reading what Brian was saying and laughing.
That's funny, Brian.
Brian's my ally in hating The Magicians.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I really liked it, and it was a fun way to kind of incorporate Arthurian lore, but make it like weird and different and just like absolutely absurdist because my dictator also becomes highly obsessed with the Bible because of course like Christianity is hyperlinked with King Arthur and all this stuff. So it was a really fun way for me to use my religion degree and basically like imbue my book with all of this stuff. So I had a really good time with it. I do plan on going back to it at some point, but then I had been toying around with this concept of this world for about 5 or 6 years. And I just kept telling Josh, I was like, this is the world, but I have no story in this world. All I know is that I would like to write something in this world. And I really wanted it to be an epic fantasy for a long time. And I couldn't think of anything that I felt would make it work. And I started reading romantasy and I was like, this is it. This is the genre that I can make this work in. Specifically, I can have courts, and that's how magic works in this world, is that it's highly secretive and it's linked to each of these courts. And it was fun in that I've made it's kind of a hybrid of fantasy in that it's not like traditional romantasy where it's like, oh, the entire plot line is romance and the relationship between these two characters. It's very political. I feel like it leads more fantasy than romance because I spend a lot of time developing the world and the lore that go into it. And there's like a secondary plot that happens within the story that has to do with gods and all of that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it ended up being something like when I was trying to pitch the book, I was like, I don't know how I would pitch this because technically it would fall under romantasy if I wanted it to get published, but I'm like, scope wise, it's much bigger than that.
Right.
And that's not to say that some romantasy books don't do that, because I think that they do, and they do it very well, where I feel like I know the world, I know the history, it feels lived in, but it just, it became something else. But that took over my brain and I wanted to write that one.
And that book is finished now? It's going through editing,
It is going through a slight restructuring right now. I did one round of edits, and then I found that there wasn't enough external stakes for my character, and I wanted to change that. So I've been reworking it, and then I hit this snag where I was like, well, if I want this traditionally published, I'm gonna have to figure out where I'm ending the book, because I can't end it at the same point now because I'm well over the word limit. And the last few days, it's just been me kind of coming to terms with the fact that if I want to tell the story in the way that it was actually intended to be told, then I'm going to have to probably do it myself. So yeah, it's been an adventure the last few days.
It's exciting though.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be a lot of rewarding things that come along with self-publishing the book, but then also just like more stress because like more decisions. But like, you know, when you have that finished product, I feel like it's gonna just feel really nice.
I am really excited. I mean, it's one of those things, when I finished writing the first draft, I felt incredibly proud of myself just because I wrote a book, you know, and it's not like you think writing a book is not that hard, right? Until you actually sit down to write a book.
I think it's very hard. I've tried to write many books.
Hard, right? You know, and it just was one of those things that I felt very pleased because I had been mulling on this world for such a long time that I was like, I feel so grateful that I have finally put it to paper and it feels alive for me, as opposed to it kind of just lingering in my brain for years and going, hey, when is this going to be a thing? Yes, it is very hard. Not to say that my first draft was written well, because it was a hot mess, but it had the roots of what I'm hoping will be a successful story. So, and even if other people don't super love it, I'm proud of it.
I'm really excited to give it 2 stars.
I'm really excited too, Kyle. I'm really excited. Hey, Joanna.
Yeah, no, writing and stuff. I spent so many years because I didn't read a lot of fantasy, and I always thought like the world building of fantasy would be like a huge turn on for me, as like figuring out all the fantasy gobbledygook. So I tried to write historical fiction for a really long time. I've started like 7 different historical fiction novels, normally around ancient China, but sometimes Roman. And what I quickly realized is I don't like how people interact with historical fiction. Like no side of it is really like fine with me, because you have the side where people are just like, it's totally fine that Con Eggleton made Caesar and Brutus foster brothers. That's totally fine with me. And I'm like, I don't know if it's fine with me. I think I'm probably not fine. But then on the other side, there's people that just get extremely pedantic about shit that like doesn't matter. And so I'm like, but this doesn't matter. And I'm like, I know myself enough to know that I'm not good. Like I read, you know, a lot of historical fiction authors who like put in all the types of armor that they wear and like the proper names for all the weapons and stuff. And I'm just like, that, like making sure all that stuff was right. Like I would do some of it, but making sure all of it was right, I would just be like, oh, I hate this. So then I finally started trying to write fantasy. Yeah. And that's just like more fun, because I can be like, this character is inspired by Julius Caesar and he's going to go get captured by pirates. Right. But I can do whatever I want with that. You know?
I mean, that, first of all, we should definitely get a story of Caesar being captured by pirates, because that is arguably like my favorite story about Caesar.
I mean, that is okay. So like when I say the book I'm writing, I mean that in quotations, because I have written like 5 pages in the last 2 years. I really need to get back to it. But the story I've been mulling for years is a story of, there was like a Dark Lord, and then he gets defeated, and then now the main character is a therapist because he's been burnt out by the whole idea of like fighting the Dark Lord and stuff. So now he just like gives therapy sessions to the people that are still in war and all this stuff, and he gets like told by the king that he has to be the therapist for the chosen one. And so the idea is like the chosen one has to have therapy, which I just think is a funny concept. And the chosen one in my head is based on Julius Caesar. So like he's just going to be this like arrogant, brash dude, and then he's going to get captured by pirates, and that's like the inciting event. Saying it means I should write it now that I've said it out loud to people. But I've really thought about it a lot. And I have done some writing and like some basic world building stuff, but I haven't actually like written much.
I love that. I definitely think you should do it. Caesar actually being kidnapped by pirates in real life is arguably my favorite thing to have ever happened to him. So, I mean, I think that's great.
Well, I just think that's the most, and not nobody, but a lot of people don't know that story. So I'm just like people are like, yeah, Caesar's just like not that really cool. I'm like, I'm sorry. He told his captors while he's just he's just tied up, and he's like, excuse me guys, raise my bounty. And they're like, what? he's like, "You guys aren't charging enough for me.
Yeah.
I'm more expensive."
Oh, that's awesome.
And then when he leaves, he tells them all, "I'm gonna hunt you all down, and I'm gonna get you guys killed, hung, or whatever he says."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, haha," and they just like drop him off on this like random, like out of backwoods province. He knows nobody there, and he just like recruits a bunch of legionaries to go track down these pirates and kills them all. And I'm like, that's so badass.
Pete, don't make me ban you.
Pete is basing this entirely on nothing. Pete's opinion is literally like Pete's opinion would be like if you asked a 5-year-old and you were like, "Hey, 5-year-old, is Caesar or Cicero better?" And that 5-year-old's like, "Well, my daddy he said one time that Cicero is like really funny, so I guess Cicero." Like he's basing it off reading a Cicero novel. Like that's the only reason he thinks that.
How important are opening lines to you for a book? Because this is something that I tried really hard when writing my book. I was like, I want to have a really good opening.
I think it is overblown generally, but I think a really strong line is still like a really good strong line. Like it's one of those things that I think people make a lot of hubbub about it. Sure. I think your first page, like I think Mark Lawrence did a thing where he was talking about people's first pages. I think that's probably better advice, is like to have a really good first page. I don't know if the first line is necessarily that good, and like nothing's ever going to be as good as the Man in Black, or the man in Black fled through the desert and the gunslinger followed. Like that is the best opening line of all time. Everybody can fight me on it. And so you're never going to live up to that. So I'm never going to try to write that. So just, try to
I love people. Cersei's opening line.
It was a dark and stormy Caesar.
Yes, exactly. Cersei's opening line, I believe, is "When I was born, the word for what I was did not exist." And I love that opening line. It's pretty much one of my favorites.
Tell me again what the line was. I was reading. I had missed a bunch of the chat.
"When I was born, the word for what I was did not exist."
Oh, I love that line. Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really loved that one. Hedge Knight opening is a banger.
Hedge Knight opening is a banger. Yeah, absolutely. Martin is really good at beginnings and endings, and also the things in the middle.
Yeah, he's good at all
of them. He's good with words.
He's also good at torturing my soul, but that's fine.
When are you guys starting your reread?
I think we're probably going to start in December. We're not going to do a book club for the channel in December. Our last book club for the year is going to be November. And then we're going to take December off because everyone's, busy and traveling with their families and stuff. And typically we spend our Christmases reading and stuff. So I'm thinking we'll probably start in December. That's my goal anyway. Yeah, I think it'll be December. Josh might start before me, but my personal goal is December. I'm excited, but also prepared to be emotionally devastated again.
I picked these up. There was like a big like sale in my town recently, and I picked these up. I got the other one too, but I'll just hold this one up. The other day I got this for $2, and like I'd kind of forgotten they made these. And I think the art is like a graphic novel of Game of Thrones, and like I think the art is so cool. Like it has all of these like really intricate pictures and stuff. And it's adapted by Daniel Abraham, who we all know is, incredible. And yeah, for like $2 for each of them, it's such a steal. And I kind of want to like just re-experience Game of Thrones through this, like on my next reread. Cause it's like, I've read it so many times. It's like, why not try a different route?
I've started looking at Christmas gifts. I've already bought Josh a bunch because I like to get it done early and then just have them put away for the end of the year. But I got him last year the illustrated versions that are sitting right here of the first 2 books, and realized that they still haven't come out with 4 or 5. Like they only have the first.
Well, they were supposed to be 20th anniversary editions.
Yeah.
So theoretically, the 4th one would come out next year.
I see. Okay.
But that there's been no news, so that doesn't mean they're not doing it. But it should theoretically come out next year. But the art in the 3rd one is garbage. It's hot trash. Really? Yeah. Have you opened the? Do you have the 3rd one?
I haven't gotten it. No. So
okay. So the 3rd one, I feel like they were gonna hit printing, and then they realized they hadn't done any art for it. So they just ask someone's like 10-year-old nephew to quickly sketch some stuff, and then they put it in. And it's so haphazardly done. I'm joking about the art. Some of it is fine, but a lot of it isn't really my art style.
Yeah.
But the thing that really drives me crazy is they don't line them up with where they're supposed to be in the book. So they'll just have like, you'll get to like a certain point in the book, and then they'll just have like 6 of them in there, like page altogether. And then some of them will be for stuff that hasn't even happened yet. So like if you were theoretically reading it for the first time, it would be like spoilers. And I also just don't think the art's very good, but the art in the first 2 are really good, especially the first one. Like I love the art in the Game of Thrones one.
Sure. Have you had a book this year that you had a really positive experience to that you weren't thinking you were going to have a positive experience to when you started it?
I liked Rage of Dragons a lot more than I thought I was going to. And it's not that I thought I was going to dislike it, but I thought like it would be like a 3.5 star, maybe a 4 star at the top of it. But I thought that book was just gas. Like I really liked it, especially the end, like one of the best endings to a book that I've read in a long time. I'm trying to think. I liked Lonesome Dove more than I expected to, but everybody says that Lonesome Dove is like one of the best books that they've ever read, if they've read it, except the one guy in here that's like, it's mid, but I guess there's always one. But I don't know. I feel like this year has been not a very good reading year for me because I was doing school, like I was finishing my degree and working full time and like having a life, and so I felt like I was really focused on just like reading like lighter stuff for a while. So like I read all of Percy Jackson for the first time. I read all of Alcatraz. I reread Hunger Games. Like I went in like a YA binge.
Yeah.
And then like I've been trying other stuff. So I've been like reading a little bit of romance, and I've just been like, I guess like I've been trying to not read books that I know that I'll really like when I'm more mentally exhausted.
Sure.
So it took me a long time. Like I read The Golden Fool in December of last year, and I planned on reading Fool's Fate in January. Yeah. And I'm reading it now. So it just took me a while to like get back where I wanted to be. Like, I didn't want to read Fool's Fate when I'm like exhausted from all the other stuff I was doing. So this year, like I always like, I am not afraid of a 3-star read. I think a lot of people are really afraid of a 3-star read. I find like there are books that I read and I give 3 stars, and it's like, I don't remember anything about this book. It was perfectly mid.
Right.
But for the most part, there's so many positive things you can get out of a 3-star read that like it helps you identify what you do like. It helps you identify what you don't like. And it usually is indicative that you're trying something that you weren't sure you were going to like as much. Like, I gave Happy Place 3 stars.
Yeah.
What is Very Brave? Jimmy, stop trolling. Go hang out with Neil Gaiman. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I lost my train of thought because Jimmy was trolling. But anyway, 3 stars. Reading a 3-star book is fine.
Yeah, you said you were giving Happy Place 3 stars.
Oh yeah, and like that's not a book I would have normally read. So like I gave it 3 stars. But I didn't think that was a negative. Like there was plenty of things I really liked about it.
Yeah, so. I've been trying to be a little bit more open with that, whereas it's like not going to Goodreads and looking at what people gave it, because I feel like that can negatively affect reading experience.
That's my ranking too, Jimmy. I'm so glad that you finally agree with me on what is important in life. D-Day and then reading a 3-star book.
Reading The Honey Witch. That's true, baby. I haven't read The Honey Witch yet, so I don't know. I can't confirm or deny. But yeah, I feel like I've done a bit of that this year where I definitely leaned into lighter reads specifically, hence my romantasy era beginning, just because I knew I wanted to read, but I also simultaneously knew I didn't have the mental capacity for stuff that was really heavy. And I think that that's honestly a good thing to recognize. I don't know how affected other people are by the books that they read, but as you know, because I send you voice messages when I'm reading things that really bother me, it affects my mood deeply. And Dark Age deeply affected my mood.
We can't talk about Dark Age here. This is
we cannot, and we won't. But it's like moments like that have just highlighted for me how important it is, like, for me to be a mood reader and to know that it is okay to put a book down and come back to it where I feel like I'm either emotionally more ready to handle that subject matter or just in the right headspace for it. Because I think sometimes we put so much pressure on us to finish a book like in a timely order. and the book might not hit for you in the way that it could have had you taken the time. Should I skip the sequels?
The answer is no, Jimmy, but Laura's going to tell you a different answer.
Yes.
I actually really want you to read Lightbringer. I'm really curious about what I know you need a break after Dark Age, like I understand.
Jimmy, have you not read them? I thought you had.
He has not. No, he has not.
So then yeah, definitely skip them. Like 100%
Don't listen to her. Listen
He's not
to
gonna
your
like
friend.
them.
I don't know about that.
He's not gonna like them.
Iron Gold, maybe, but Dark Age? Jimmy is gonna like Dark Age. I guess we'll see when Red God comes out and he reads them. But your friend Yolanda, who you just spent time with, really likes them, Jimmy.
She sure does, and she's wrong. As much as I love Yolanda, she's wrong. Yeah, erase them. Honestly, you'll be happier for it. I'm happy to talk to you about this because I have many feelings.
Have you read any of The Expanse?
I haven't, but it's going to be one of our book club options that people can vote for. Josh loves it. It's one of his favorite series of all time. So basically what we did when we started the book club is we sat down and we said, okay, what are books that a few books that each of us has read that we really want the other to read? That's either a book one or a standalone. Or what are books that we collectively want to read that neither one of us has read? And Josh chose Expanse for one of his options because I've been wanting to read it and I feel like I would maybe enjoy it more just reading it in a group experience than by myself. I'm not well versed in sci-fi. It's just not a genre that I've read enough of yet to feel like I have a really solid footing. And I feel like the few that I have read are more sci-fantasy than they are sci-fi solidly, I guess. But Josh absolutely loves that series.
What sci-fi have you read besides
that's a good question. Like, honestly, like I can't even think of it off the top of my head. So it goes to show you, like, I feel like there was The Odd Thing in like my teens that I read where I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of like a mix of things, but like nothing in the very recent past.
Have you read Project Hail Mary?
I have not. No.
Oh my God. Let's read Project Hail Mary together. I've been thinking about a reread for a long time.
Okay. You
got to listen to the audiobook though.
That's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm hyped. It's such a good book. I think you're going to really like it. I hope so.
I hope so. I mean, it's obviously a book that I've seen circulated endlessly. So it's one that I've wanted to look at.
I do agree with Tom. Like the Expanse like is sci-fi, but it doesn't feel as like sci-fantasy as like Red Rising or Sun Eater, like which are more obviously playing with fantasy tropes. But the Expanse still like there's a reason there's such a big crossover between the fantasy and sci-fi communities on that series. But I've only read the first book, so
I am excited to try Sun Eater. That's also been creeping at the top of my list because I have it right there. And I walk by it every day and think, I feel
good cover.
Like that might be happening pretty soon. Josh and I are going on a trip in a couple of weeks and he was saying he might bring it with us. Even though it's supposed to be a book club book, we might just bite the bullet and like read it before. But
I'd be excited for your thoughts on Sun Eater. I would imagine you would both like it.
I think so.
I think Rockio is like very interested in the classics in a way that I think you would really appreciate.
Yeah, that's basically what I've seen. I know John from Talking Story. He and I, when I had him on for Love Bomb, he and I chatted for like an hour afterwards, which was great off camera. And he was telling me how much he thinks I'm gonna like that series, and I thought, great. I'm always
there's also like a lot of exploring ancient ruins and stuff. Like I also just like how the world building goes, where it's like they still have echoes of Earth's past. So there's like some things that they know about from Earth, but they mix it up. So like, there's one example is like there's Sid Arthur. So they think of King Arthur and like Siddhartha as like the same figure. And I just think that stuff is super cool. Like I can't get enough of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I enjoy that kind of thing. So I probably will enjoy it. Honestly, like I'm pretty excited to read it. And I finally feel like I'm getting to a point where I'm excited about books again. Because I don't know if it was like this collective lull that was sort of felt over the summer, but I know a lot of people went into this slump really, and I'd say like June or July, and I don't know if it's because people were maybe spending more time outside, they were reading less, and just summer is summer and you want to be outdoors and all that kind of stuff.
And
I
think it happens every summer.
I think it does too, because I thought back on it last year and I thought I think I probably read fewer books over the summer than I did in the fall or the winter, but I'm getting to that point again where I'm actually gearing up to want to read, not only just reread books, but read books that I have not read yet. Yes, Jimmy, a lot of cocaine. Sun Eater, hit my local bookstore. Yeah, I love this when they have every book but the first one. So frustrating. So frustrating. For me, it didn't matter for me personally, but this was Abercrombie. Every time I went into my local Barnes & Noble, they did not have The Blade itself, but they had so many other books. It was just...
Maybe that means that a lot of people are buying the first book, so...
Which made me excited, and then I was happy because they have recently expanded the SFF section at my local store. And they had now the First Law and they had Age of Madness, whereas previously it was only First Law. So I'm excited that he's getting more shelf space. And
it's interesting that they only had First Law and not Age of Madness. Like, yeah, my bookstores always have Age of Madness.
Really?
They're less likely to have the original trio than like I feel like a lot of times there's like the hero or like the heroes and then Best Served Cold and then Age of Madness. And like maybe the Blade itself at our.
I've never seen any of the standalones at any of my local bookstores.
Really?
Ever.
That's interesting.
Never. No.
Like the heroes. Hold on. The Heroes and Trouble with Peace are the only two of my Abercrombie books that I bought like new in a store.
Oh wow!
Because like Heroes was always there, so I just finally bought it one day.
I was so depressed. Broken Binding had those extras of the,
and they went right away.
10 seconds. They were gone in I think
they had enough to send one to
seconds.
Mike though.
Yes, they did. Which like I'm very enviously eyeing in his videos and stuff. Yeah. But oh man, I was so upset. I thought like, oh, finally, like I'm gonna get a special edition Abercrombie. And
I knew they were gonna go so fast. I'm really anxious tomorrow to like get those Dragonsteel ball tickets. Like I'm like that's gonna go fast, and that site's gonna crash. They should just send me tickets. Like people should just send me specialized links.
Right.
Like.
Right.
Is that so hard?
Not asking for too much, I would say, honestly. But I just had my trip to Montreal, and I actually just got those 3 versions of Abercrombie in Indigo or chapters. I don't know if what do they call it around in your area? Is it Indigo or chapters? Both. Okay.
Indigo, chapters, and Coles. It's like the same company.
Oh, okay, yeah. There's none of them are marked as Coles in Quebec. It used to be chapters, and now it's Indigo. But the fantasy sections in my growing up bookstores in Montreal are just so top tier. And I was so happy that I found these copies of these books because on the American Amazon, they were so much more expensive. And with the Canadian conversion, I got them for a steal. So I was really excited.
I wish you had told me because I had like a whole extra trilogy that I gave to a friend.
Well, it's not like I was intentionally looking for them. They kind of just popped out at me.
No, I know, but if you had mentioned that you did, I would have sent them to you. But
if you happen to come across Broken Binding special editions of Joe Abercrombie that you don't want, I will gladly take them.
Keeping those ones.
Yeah, honestly, those are probably the only special editions I don't have that I'm upset.
Oh, there's so many special editions, and I like the special edition mania has got to stop. But I'm not going to be the person to stop them because, man, they're so good. And like this book, I haven't even read The Scar by China Miéville. But if I saw a human being with the Broken Binding edition of The Scar by China Miéville just walking down the street, I'd probably hit him with a brick and run. Like, like it looks so good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man.
I think they do the nicest job for me personally. I really like Broken Binding. I know Grim Oak also does really beautiful stuff. Those are the ones that I would say that I've seen in person that I like.
I agree, Jimmy. I should read The Scar. I'm going to read Perdido Street Station in December. It's on the books. And then after that, I will read The Scar. The Scar sounds more interesting to me, but I want to read Perdido anyway, so I might as well start with it.
Jimmy, do you think I should also read this, or is this exclusively Kyle? Because I can see this being exclusively Kyle.
Well, Jimmy really liked The Scar, so I have to imagine but maybe there's a specific reason why he'd think that you wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I know he's pretty intentional with what books he recommends per person, but I am a hater of certain things like Dark Age. But that's for another time, but that's fine.
a hate
What's your
bomb.
beef with Broken Binding? Oh,
Their
man.
sub list? I don't know. I
Yeah, I
finally
didn't get
actually
it.
so I have never signed up for their sub list because I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'd ever want to spend like, the $50 or $60 a month or whatever on special editions. And then every time they come out with one I really like, I'm like, man, I would pay $60 for this. And I'm like, the times like where I have friends that have it and they don't like the books, they just like immediately sell them. Like
Tell
it's
them,
so
yeah.
easy to sell them.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, I gotta sign up because I'm really
Yeah.
bummed out to miss out on the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn ones. Like I think those are
Mhm. They
incredibly
are
beautiful.
really nice. Yeah, they're really,
Um,
really nice.
so
Yep.
hopefully in a year or two, after they've gone through all of my favorite series that I don't
Yeah.
get, I will get a subscription just in
Yeah.
time for them to do the Magicians and uh, they'll probably do
Right?
Skull Sworn by Brian Staveley and
I
Ready
hear
Player
you.
2. It'll
I
be
signed
great.
up a year ago and I've heard nothing. So I re-signed up on a different account just like in case there was something. But there's so many subscriptions. I don't do any of them. I know that you can see reviews for people that are hit or miss for every single subscription company, service, whatever you look at. But I agree. Like I know specifically for Fairy Loot, like they do a lot of romantasy ones, or they've done a few that aren't like technically romantasy, like the Stardust Thief, which I really enjoyed. And most people just sell those books immediately if they don't like them, and they all sell, which is
Yeah.
kind of wild.
That's what I
So
think put me on it. I'm like, no matter what, I'll be able to sell them. It's not. I wish I had come to that conclusion like a year ago,
right,
but
yeah,
oh well. I think it's
exactly.
Fairy Loot. I could be wrong, but there's a subscription service that focuses on romantasy that is launching like an adult fantasy line for
It's
next
Fairy
year.
Loot, yeah,
Okay, and it's heavily hinted that the Devils is going to be their first one. So I've signed up for the interest form for that one, and
nice.
because I want a special edition of the Devils.
Me
So hopefully
too.
that's what happens.
I would kill for that arc. Like they're one of those 36 arcs that he is like mysteriously sending out. But I don't have
Brian,
enough followers for that, so it's never gonna happen. Uh,
Brian, I didn't know you had a Broken Binding subscription. Man, you just live like straight south of me. Just like, let me know when you don't want them. I'll just drive down and pick them up. Save on the shipping.
yeah,
That prevents me somewhat with Canadian stuff is like, man, the shipping
I know it's
to
killer.
Canada is just insane. Like,
It is
I don't
killer.
understand why it needs to be that bad. Like, it's just crossing imaginary line.
Yeah, I hear
Although I
you.
have noticed UK shipping to Canada is cheaper than UK shipping to the States.
Oh, substantially, yeah. It's that Commonwealth relationship that they're like, oh, it's not as bad, but it's fine. I am excited because we are going to England soon, and I am super excited to go to Waterstones and look for
What are you
Waterstone
going to
edition
England for?
for a vacation.
Oh, nice. You
Yes,
deserve
we
a
are excited.
vacation.
Yes, we are excited. We haven't had a proper vacation since pre-COVID, so we're looking forward to it and just kind of having time. But we don't have much time in London, but the time we do have in London, I've dedicated to going to bookstores. That's literally all we're doing.
Listen, I watched all of Library of Vikings early videos where he would just wander
Yep.
into a charity shop and the people would just chuck signed editions at him, like, take this out of here. So I'm sure you're gonna just walk in and like an entire like Robert Jordan Wheel of Sign signed collection that you could sell
It's
for
just gonna fall
$1,000
in,
will just fall on you.
realistically, even if that were to happen, I wouldn't take it. I would leave it for someone who is legitimately a fan of Robert Jordan. But
Oh,
that
I'm
is
not that way at all. I saw a signed edition of Empire of the Vampire the other day, and I
Mhm.
already have a signed edition of this book, and I don't even think I'm gonna like this book. Like, I have one over there because it was signed, and
Mine
I
just came in the library today. I got the notice for that book.
really, if I had time, I would buddy read it for you, but I
Yeah.
don't have time. But I think I'm not gonna like it. But I don't want to get rid of my copy and kill till I know. But I saw that one at Value Village. It was signed, and I was like, for
Mhm.
$5, like I can't just
Yeah,
not get it. And then
right.
instead, what I'm doing is I'm sending it to Jordan because I know Jordan really likes that book. So at least
Of
then I'm
course.
like, okay, well, a friend of mine is getting it, but I can't just
Right.
leave it there for cheap. I'm like, that's too good of a find. Like the collector in me is sad.
Yeah. Jimmy, you're on fire today.
Jimmy, usually reserves this level of insanity for Alan. So I guess he's really
Exactly.
Really missing Allen streams.
I'll take it. Is it Robert Jordan or just
The reason I mentioned Robert Jordan is because Theo found a signed Path of Daggers hardcover at Valley Village like yesterday. And I was like, that is a good find. Yeah.
Yeah. Random.
Hey, sometimes you find random things.
So I have noticed this because I'm in a couple of book groups on Facebook or whatever, and it wasn't my favorite series of hers, but the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas had these original covers, and they are no longer being printed, and people sell them for just astronomical amounts. They range from between like,
I've heard of this. I think somebody in Jimmy's
like $450 to like $2,000 to $5,000, depending if they're signed and hardcover and all kinds of stuff. And people often will post if they found one of them in like a thrift store and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, you've got 1 out of 8 books. Like, you're so close. It's so crappy when that's the series that you want.
No, Jimmy, they only did that the fake signatures in the Sanderson ones. So the Path of Daggers ones would be real, because I got tricked by that. I just wasn't thinking, and I found like hardcovers of The Gathering Storm, and I looked and I was like, "Oh, signed by Robert Jordan." I'm like, wait, impossible.
No, it wasn't. Okay. Yeah. Have you continued with your reading through Wheel of Time?
No. So I was listening before bed, and I recently realized that the 20 minutes or so before bed is where I just like process my day. Like, I have a ritual. One of the reasons that I'm like pretty good at remembering books I read is at the end of the day, I will like go through what I read, like just quickly, and think about like what happened in the books that day, which is a really good way of like storing it into long-term memory.
Sure.
And then like, process anything else that's going on in my day. And then I've realized that while I like to be overstimulated, that 15-20 minutes is like the time where I want to just not be stimulated. So I kind of stopped listening before bed, and that's the only time that I'm going to be giving Wheel of Time. Like that was the 20 minutes a day that it had, and it lost its slot.
That is totally fair.
I do think like occasionally, like if I'm having trouble sleeping or like whatever, I'll put on an audiobook, and I will eventually continue Wheel of Time because it's great for falling asleep. Truly
it is
wonderful.
Perfect for falling asleep. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree.
Jimmy, you need to take more cocaine or something, because so you were like a little gone for a while. Did I show you what I got from Valley Village the other day, the Shadow of the Wind? Yeah, I'm gonna show you real quick. I'm gonna grab it.
All right. I'm surrounded by Wheel of Time hammers. I'm so sorry, Tom. People announcement, but Gavin will be on for a Love Bomb chat in a little bit, which is gonna be exciting because that'll be a fun chat.
I just dropped like 5 books trying to pick this up. Okay, so I at Valley Village, if you buy 4 books, you get 1 free. So I had 4 books, and I was looking around for a 5th book, and I saw this like Shadow of the Wind, and I was like, oh, this is like has like a nice slip cover, and I was like, it's nice. I was like, I'll get that for my 5th book. I already own this book, but like whatever. That's a cool edition,
right?
It looks like this, and I just bought it. So I technically got this book for free, and then I came home and I looked at it, and it is a signed limited edition. They're only made 1,000 of these.
Oh, wow.
And it's signed by the author, who has since passed on. And this was just sitting in a Valley Village in like a small town. And I'm like, that's insane. This is the craziest find I'll ever find at the Valley Village.
Yeah, that's quite a find.
So now I have to read that book because
that's the law. That's the law. You have to do it now.
Everybody's going to London. This seems like a place to go.
Yes, I am also excited. Joanna is going a little bit after I am, so she and I can then talk about which stores we thought were the best. I'm excited.
Tom, I am not a Wheel of Time hater. I am a Wheel of Time midder. Some of it's really good. Okay, so
midder. That's one way to put it.
Laura is a Wheel of Time hater.
I am very, very much. But here's the thing. There are things that I really appreciate about Robert Jordan and what he does. I think that in terms of world building, excellent. I think that his world it's established. There's different cultures, different languages, different histories. Like, the world is very well done. I think that the history of the Forsaken is super interesting. It's just, I don't connect with his character work, and that for me is the problem.
That's my biggest problem too.
So, it's just a miss for me. I can see why it works for other people, but not me.
Robert Jordan's never had a friend. Like, I'm pretty sure. Like I'm as sure as a person can be that is a man that never had a friend, because
oh my gosh,
he writes friendships. I don't believe a single person is friends in that series. Like, for like 7 books, somebody will be like, "This is my best friend in the world," but every single conversation is them just hating each other. And I'm like, I think you have business associates that you hated, and you just had to pretend you were friends with them. Like, I don't understand your concept of friendship at all.
Yeah.
And like, I don't like, I have troubles when a narrative is telling me something that I don't feel. Like, I had this problem with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow too, which a lot of people loved, and I thought was just fine. And my problem with it is that it kept telling me that these 2 characters were like the best of friends of all time. Sure. And I'm just like, 97% of their interactions are extremely toxic and terrible. Like, there's never. So then I'm just mad that the book is trying to tell me something that is not true. Right. And I feel like that happens to me a lot with Robert Jordan's characters.
I agree. I felt very similarly. For me, it's just, and I was worried that I was going to feel similarly with Sanderson, just because when I started Stormlight, I was like, oh, I'm hoping this isn't just a trope of the genre, basically. But no, it's Robert Jordan. So, yeah.
I just have to say, I love the chat today. The chat has been so funny.
This has been a great chat, guys. Also, this is our new kitten.
You got a new kitten.
Thackeray Binks. So he's making his little debut.
So you have 2 cats now or 3?
Oh, we have 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, we're those people. They're all rescues. So, yeah, but he's just super sweet and super cuddly. So it's been good. But yeah, for those people.
I want a cat so bad.
Yeah.
I've never wanted a cat more, or I've never wanted anything more than a cat. My sister-in-law is like deathly allergic to cats. So if we had a cat, she would just never be able to come over, because even if the house has been cleaned, like, she can just feel it in the air and start breaking out. And I was like, I always joke with my wife. I'm like, I wish I had known this before I married you, because I would have chosen a cat.
Close, Terry. It's Thackeray. It's from Hocus Pocus. So it's close though. Binks is mostly what we call him, but yeah.
No, one thing we haven't talked about yet. You mentioned this author several times, but each time you were talking about something and then we moved on, which is that I finished ACOTAR last night.
Did you really?
Yeah.
And you didn't tell me you were reading it?
Well, I was going to tell you today. That's
oh my god. Okay.
When you brought it up, you were talking about this really intense scene that made you cry. I didn't want to be like, oh, by the way, I read, so I was just letting you vibe.
Okay, I will remind you, Kyle. This is a love bomb chat, so just keep that in mind when you tell me how you
trash. No, it's fine. Like, it's exactly what I expected in terms of my enjoyment, which is that I thought it was fine.
Okay.
It's interesting to me, like, my perception of it based on what it was, and like the reception to it. Because I don't really understand why the first book is as popular as it is. And I don't say that like to be I'm actually not even hating on it. I just really mean like it doesn't lean into the romance super hard. Like, there's some, obviously, and especially towards the end, it gets more romance. So like, I don't see the romance elements as being like a big sell. Sure. And I don't think like the plot is, again, like, fine. Like, I never thought it was bad, but I also like, until like the last third, I feel like you don't really know what's going on, like with the overarching story. And so like, I couldn't imagine the majority of people reading it and being like, this plot was really killer.
No,
and like the characters, the characters are fine. So like, basically what I'm saying is, like, I didn't dislike reading it. Independent of anything else, I would not continue. I am going to continue just because people tell me the second book is kind of where the real story starts. So I will read the second one. But I'm mostly just like kind of surprised that this is the book that hit. Like,
I think
it just is interesting to me.
I think it's twofold in that she already had major success with her Throne of Glass series and had established a loyal fan base. And I think I know the general consensus is that the least favorite book in the ACOTAR series is book 1. So I think it was more that people who had already known her as an author kind of had that trust established where they were like, we're setting the foundation here, and then we're gonna get a bit more into it. I agree in that ACOTAR is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like if you look just at book one, that's exactly
I didn't know that, and so I read it, and I was like, "This is Beauty and the Beast."
So I also didn't know that, and was texting my friends who had read it and were the ones that told me to read it, and I was like, "This is just a sexier Beauty and the Beast retelling. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to take from this, but like that is literally all that this is." And they were like, "Okay, just trust the process, and if you like it, then continue." There is something that happens at the very end of book 2, which is what prompted, or at book 1, excuse me, that prompted me to go read book 2. And then the tone is inherently different in book 2 than it is in book 1. And that for me is really where I connected. So I'm curious to see what you think of it when you read it. Cause honestly, I agree with your assessment of the first book. I was like, this is fine. Like it's not, I don't think worthy of being like the #1 best-selling book on the New York Times for like 6 straight years. But I get it, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, like in it, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's only 1 sex scene in the book. There might be 2, but there's not very many.
No.
And like I guess I was just expecting it to be more romance focused.
So here's the thing with that series, and this isn't something that actually drives me insane, is that so many people are like, oh, she just writes smut. And I'm like, if you actually go and you count the pages in the books, it's 5% of the books is sexual content. And then there's 95% that is not. And I'm like, if that's what you equate as being smut, like I'm a little worried, you know.
Like Fourth Wing had 2 sex scenes that were like much more graphic than this one. Like much more. So like, I mean, in terms of like sex scenes that I've read, I didn't even think it was particularly graphic. It was basically like, ooh, I'm hot and bothered. And then like it cuts to the next scene. So I'm like, it wasn't really.
Like it definitely does increase as the series progresses. But I also feel like it might sound ridiculous to some people. I don't think that it's gratuitous in the sense that she's just like throwing it in there. I actually do think
I don't think it's gratuitous either, because it's part of the it's part of the character.
It's part of the character, and characters, like it's other characters that you meet along the way and stuff. So yeah.
I mean the Fae in general are just ridiculous. And I don't mean like her Fae. I just mean Fae in general. Like the whole like ritual that they have to go to, absurd. Like it's and the thing is that was like the part of the book where I was the most gripped, because she went into the situation clearly not knowing what the hell was going on. And everybody's like, you need to get the hell out of here. And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, ooh, what's going to go on? And then when they actually get the answer, I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Like, this is insane. This would only happen if it was like Fae or vampires. Like, this is the only type of thing. And so, yeah, that kind of stuff. Like, again, I'm trying to judge the book on like what it's trying to do. Like I would have never just like went and read it separately, but I do think it has now become, for better or worse, one of the like foundations of modern fantasy. I don't know, Jimmy.
You won't know that reference until a bit later, but that's fine.
Okay. But I do think it's valuable to be able to talk to it and know what it actually is, as opposed to like what people talk about it. Also, I didn't realize it's actually a 4-book series. Like I know there's a novella in there, but I thought it was like a 9-book series.
Books. I personally consider it 5 books, because the novella, even though it is short, it's a transition book, because the first 3 books are a concluded trilogy, and the POV switch from book 3 to book 5. And the novella serves as a multi POV book where you start getting familiar with the new voices of what will be the POVs for book 5.
Now, I have to tell you my extra experience with this book that happened to me last night, because I'm still mad about it. I might unfriend my friend. Not really, but I'm being dramatic.
Yes.
So I have a friend who used to read a lot, and she got out of reading, and then I noticed she was reading ACOTAR, and I was like, oh yeah, like I have a couple friends that like, you know, have wanted me to kind of read that. Like I might try it soon. And she was talking about how she had read most of Throne of Glass, and then she kind of stopped reading it, and then she read the first 4 ACOTAR books, and then she kind of fell off.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, like I just wasn't really liking it. And so we talked for a little while. I'm like, I think you should try Mistborn, because I'm always trying to get people on that Brando Sando hype train.
Absolutely.
And she's like, I'm a binger. So I was like, okay, you can borrow like all 3 of these books, because like we've been friends a long time. I'm sure I'll get them back. So then she started it the other day. So she now knows that Vin is the main character, who is, last I checked, a woman. So then, I messaged her last night and I was like, hey, I read and finished ACOTAR. Like, I thought it was fine. And she said, yeah, I also thought the first book was just fine. And then she said, did you just not like it because it was following a woman? And I was like, first of all, how dare you? I was like,
what?
You're reading one of my favorite books of all time right now. That is
you also like
Warbreaker.
Like,
yeah, but she doesn't know Warbreaker. But just in general, I was like, how dare you think that this is I just can't get beyond like that I'm following a woman.
Yeah.
Like I'm just some cave dweller that just comes out like need man stabbing thing. That's my new channel name, man stabbing thing. Because I just can't I just couldn't believe that was what she assumed my problem was with it.
Right.
I also read the second book of Throne of Glass. And it's better than the first book. Those books are still stupid as hell. Like, yes. And I say stupid as hell. Like, I mean, like, I enjoyed most of that book, but it's like just inherently ridiculous. Like, I'm just
so which order did you read them in?
Read by misogyny. That's really good, Tom.
That's a great channel title. Yeah.
That'll get me a lot more clicks. It might not be the clicks I want, but it would get me more clicks.
It's definitely not.
Sorry. So I have not read The Assassin's Blade. So I read.
Okay, you did Throne of Glass, and then
Crown of Midnight.
Okay. Yeah, that series I felt increasingly got better. The first half, this is part of the thing for me. I read ACOTAR and liked it so much, and then everyone, specifically Esme. So Esme, if you're watching this is your fault, but I love you. She was saying, the first half of that series is mid, and then it gets much better. So you basically know going into an 8-book series that the first 4 books are going to be really average, and it's going to then be a payoff at the end. And I will say that was true in a sense that I did think that the final 4 books were substantially better than the first 4, but it is my least favorite of her series by far. And that seems to be a widely unpopular opinion.
I don't think I'm going to make it 8 books into the series, but I will read the third one. I will say that the last chunk of the second book, so Crown of Midnight, is maybe the only Sarah J. Maas reading where I was like actually really interested.
Yeah.
There was like some cool plot stuff happening that I was like, oh, okay.
The thing I like about Throne of Glass is that she actually really expands the world, and it feels like a large epic fantasy world compared to like ACOTAR and Crescent City and stuff. Like, it felt kind of reminiscent to reading more traditional fantasy in that there was different areas, different regions, different cultures, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, I like this aspect of it. I struggled deeply with the main character. So that for me again. It's like,
I don't think I'm ever going to like any of her main characters, though. They're all just like pick me girls. Just
kind of. Yeah. That's not true, though. If you continue with ACOTAR, you'll see what I mean.
Well, ACOTAR is much shorter. There's actually, like, if I don't hate the second book, there's a chance I just finish the series over time.
I honestly feel like book 5 is just so worth reading. It's so good. Like, it's so, so good. So,
right. Well, you hated Dark Age, so I don't know that I trust your opinions.
I mean, my Dark Age opinion is inherently correct, but that is fine. I will not continue.
Because this is a love bomb, I can talk about how much I love the Red Rising sequels.
I can mute you. I
can't contradict me. So, Lightbringer is an extremely good book, and Dark Age is. I almost said Darkbringer. Dark Age is also really good, but a very hard read. And Iron Gold is okay. What I will say though is what I like about Lightbringer is that each Red Rising book before that did 1 to 2 major things that I disliked.
Just 1 to 2? That's generous.
Just 1 to 2. And so I feel like Pierce Brown values shock value too much, like to a point where it's detrimental. Like, I feel like Pierce Brown watched a Game of Thrones and was like, oh, this is how you get people. And I know that's not what happened. Like, I know, but
it feels
he's
that
like,
way,
oh, this is what you do. You just randomly kill people. And that's what he just took to heart. And I'm just like, man, like, there's like character arcs and like structure and just like, like I just value the like Martin sensibilities where like if a character is killed, it's like a major character, there's like a quote unquote point to it. And sometimes the point is that there is no point. Like, I'm not saying everything has to have like a grand, neat narrative.
No,
like Joe Abercrombie is really good for like having a character die like in a
my man. Yep.
Yeah, in a like an organic way that feels like it's like inconclusive, but that's the point. Yeah. But with Pierce, it's like, I mean, he literally just feels like he's like, oh, I guess I'm killing this guy today. And that really bothers me.
It bothered me immensely because in the first 3 books, I felt like, do you only dislike Selena because she's a woman?
Yes.
I will say the thing for me was that with the first 3 books, I felt like death was handled very well in that it wasn't like, obviously people died in the first 3 books of Red Rising, but I felt like it wasn't so frequent enough that I didn't have time to mourn that character with the characters in the book.
I basically disagree with you, but that's okay.
Well, you're wrong, Kyle. But my whole thing became that I felt I couldn't actually appreciate what was happening in these later books because everything felt so rushed to get to the next big thing as opposed to giving it time to breathe. So, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, this is insane.
Like, you're proving my point here, Kyle. Jimmy, if you're still listening, you should definitely not read these 3 later books.
What are you talking about? That's in Morningstar.
Oh, whatever.
So it's a whatever because it's in a book you like. But Jimmy shouldn't read Dark Age.
He's already read this, so we're safe.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a lot of weird things with that series. I really enjoyed the first 3 books, but I agree it's definitely not perfect in its execution in the first 3 books. But the latter 2, I'd be happy to not read the sequels. There we go.
Oh
man.
What else have we not talked? You know, a book that I think you would really like is The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan. Is that on your radar?
It is. I actually just added it to my Goodreads want to read. So yes, it is on my radar.
It feels okay. First, have you read Scott Lynch yet?
I have only read book 1 of Locke Lamora.
And what did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I love the humor in that book. I thought it was great. Father Chains is a phenomenal character. And I really liked Locke and Jean, but of the characters of that book, Father Chains for me is probably the standout character.
And how long ago did you read that? Like, are you not reading the other ones intentionally? Oh, so you read it this year and you're going to continue?
I am. Yeah. I got Josh Locke Lamora for Christmas last year, book 1, and he absolutely loved it. And now they're probably in his top 3 book series of all time. So he's excited, of course, with the novella coming out next year. But
should be 3 novellas, theoretically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I felt like it was conclusive at the end of the book. Like there's a little bit of mystery, but I totally feel like I needed to jump into the next book. So it's kind of like a Martin situation.
The second book is the same.
Yeah, and that's, I know it's episodic for the most part, so I just didn't want to rush it because I enjoyed it, and I knew it's not like it's going to be in flooding with, new books in this series. I was like, this is something I can take my time on, so I'm not like rushing.
No, I totally agree. The third book does have a bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, Josh is upset about it.
Most of the book is not. It just like drops this like random like info dump, and then you're like, wait, what? And then the book ends. Mm-hmm. But they're all really good. Republic of Thieves is maybe a little bit less good, but Red Seas Under Red Skies is very good. I don't know why that one is treated as if it's worse. Like I don't understand like the criticism of it. Like I think it's pretty much just as strong. And then it's like whether or not you enjoy the city aesthetic or the sailing aesthetic.
Right. But, yeah. I'm open to both.
What I was going to say is Silver Blood Promise. I don't really get the first law comparison much, but it does remind me a little bit of Locke Lamora. Okay. Locke Lamora is better with dialogue, and it gets more into like the inner city dealings. And Silver Blood Promise, like if I have a criticism of it, it gets pretty fetch questy, but I really liked the main character and the setup of the problem he has to solve and his dynamic with the other main character. I think that you will really like. And it was just a really good time. And it just seems like a book you'd really like.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it. Honestly, like I was saying, I'm getting back into that wanting to read new books. And I can't remember who I saw. Someone came up on my Goodreads thing the other day and was like, had read this and they really liked it. And I was like, okay, what's this about? And I looked at it and thought, that sounds good. Have a good night, Joanna. Thanks for stopping by.
Good night.
So yeah, it'll probably be one that will be read eventually.
Do you have like some books that you need to get read before the end of the year?
So I definitely want to finish Sunlit Man before I read Wind and Truth. That's probably the most pressing. I have read a couple of book ones recently, and I would like to finish the series. I read Divine Rivals recently. I'd like to read Ruthless Vows to finish the duology, which I enjoyed. Again, I thought that was fun. It's interesting to see what is happening in YA writing in the last few years and how it doesn't necessarily feel like the YA books I grew up with, and I think that's a good thing. And then I read book one of The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Steele, Danielle Jensen, which I was saying earlier, which I want to continue. So those I would say are probably the most like pressing. And then I'll have my book club books. Like I'm pretty sure I know what October is going to be, but I'm not going to announce that until we have our live. But yeah, I'm trying to be more open, just like a little less planny, especially because we have that book club read, which I know I have to read. So just where the mood takes
And then
me.
Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell.
Exactly.
And rereading ACOTAR 5 times.
Probably. Not 5 times, but I could very easily see rereading it again in December because it has
That's so wild. I love rereading. Like I've always loved rereading, and you make me feel like I don't love rereading.
So
I'm like, you just read it.
How is this reread until this year? Like I did as a kid because I reread Harry Potter so much.
Really?
And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and then it was this year where I read ACOTAR and was like, I really like this. And then I read Emily Henry and I was like, this is speaking my language. And I immediately read a bunch of Emily Henry books. And then I reread ACOTAR about 2.5 to 3 months later. And then, of course, I've since read it a few more times. And I think it's just because I pick up new things every time I'm reading it, which I really enjoy. And I think it's also one of those things too that you can kind of just have it on as comfort. Like I listen to the ACOTAR books. I don't generally read them because I do the graphic audios, which I will say, I think the graphic audios for ACOTAR are really well done. I think that they're worth their value because they're not like inundated with special effects and like noise and all that kind of stuff, which can normally drive me crazy. But I just found that I really liked that this year. And I think this is kind of going back into what I was saying, and that I knew I needed lighter things because life was heavy, that I didn't want to spend the limited amount of free time that I had not enjoying myself. So it's very freeing to give yourself permission to reread, because I think a lot of the time we get hung up on the fact, well, I only have a limited number of time to read books.
Tom and Simon are talking about that in the comments right now.
Yeah, like as much as I can, you know? And yeah, it's depriving you of a new book that you could be reading. But simultaneously, I look at it and I go, okay, like I can read a new book
if I know that I'm going to like it.
Yeah, but I already know that I love this. So again, it really depends on the mood.
Like, and this is different from the rereads that you're doing now. And sometimes, like, I mean, I reread Jade City within like a year of reading it. So like I sometimes reread closer. But you get so much out of rereading a book later on. Like it just, you're a different person. And I know people have said that, but like it really, like when I reread 11/22/63 this year, I just felt like I am in such a different place in my life than when I read it the first time. Cause I was, 17 or 18 years old, maybe 19 the first time. I was single. And like a lot of that book is a romance, and it was still one of my favorite Stephen King books. But it hit way differently now that I'm like married, and his problems that he's dealing with in that book are just way more relatable to me. And so the themes of the book hit way differently. Like I feel like I had a totally different experience with it the second time.
Yeah, I completely get that.
And that is like way more valuable to me, like than reading a book that I haven't read, but like I just found like decent, like,
right.
Like there's the same thing of like going to a restaurant. It's like, yeah, I want to try different things at a restaurant, but I know I'm going to like the fettuccine Alfredo. I've had it 3 times already.
Exactly. I get that completely. And honestly, it's interesting too. Like I just reread The Chamber of Secrets this past month, and for the first time ever, I did it on audiobook as opposed to sitting down and reading it. It was actually really interesting because I didn't enjoy it as much as I normally did. And I didn't know if it was because it was the audio version and it wasn't like my actual sitting down and immersing myself in the book. And I was like, I haven't reread this one in a while. I wonder if my taste has changed or if it's just the medium in which I was listening to the book or like in taking in the book. So, I mean, I definitely think there is value in rereading because it not only can be indicative of how your taste does change over time, but you can refamiliarize yourself with something that brought you joy and remember why it brought you joy. And I think that that's a really wonderful thing, like it's a nostalgia factor.
Can you highlight Tom's comment real quick?
Which one?
I always eat the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually guessed this before you said it, Tom. And the reason is because in psychology, you learn how like people have different
I'll be right back, but you keep talking to Tom.
Sure. You have different facets of like I mean, I guess you can use like the spoon theory of like you have different amounts of spoons that you can use to put into trying new things. And a lot of people will tend to do that in the same type of area. So for instance, if I value like rereading more because that's more of a comfort for me, just generally speaking, am more likely to then be more conservative or like be more adventurous with what I eat or something like that. Like people get adventurous in different ways, and then that like satisfies the way they choose to be adventurous. And then so it's just funny that like when you said that you don't reread, I was like, I bet he eats the same stuff. And you know what? I was right. So psychology can teach you things, folks, on a very broad general basis. But yeah, man, try a reread. I'm sure it'll be fine. Like, reread Three Body Problem. Now that I really want to reread Three Body Problem because now that I've read the whole trilogy, I think I will like Three Body Problem way better. And I also read Words of Radiance very quickly, Daniel. And Laura's back, so.
I am. Yes. Loved Words of Radiance.
That is so much time listening to people bicker, Daniel.
That is a lot of time, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I missed what you said, but I assume it was very illuminating in terms of ordering the same food or eating the same foods.
Yeah, I was just saying that like people are adventurous in different ways. So like,
yeah, for sure.
Somebody's adventurous with like what they read, they're more likely to be conservative in a different area, like eating the same stuff. So
yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting too because this year, while simultaneously allowing myself to reread, I have tried genres that I wouldn't necessarily have tried previously or books that I wouldn't have tried previously. So like this year I read The Bone Clocks, which is not something that was ever on my radar. And like had someone just dropped it in front of me and said, read this book, I would have thought probably not for me. And I ended up super enjoying it. Found Emily Henry, who's now a favorite author, have read all these romanticy books.
Romanticy is like a whole new thing for you.
It's a whole new thing for me. And it's so fun because there's so many books that I now go, that sounds great. And I can enjoy that. Yeah, The Bone Clocks.
But not Lonesome Dove.
No. I think about Crispin Hershey, Jimmy, on a regular basis. I also think about the end of that book on a regular basis, which I don't know if you've read The Bone Clocks, Kyle, but
I have not. I have not read any David Mitchell.
I think you'd probably like it, knowing going into it that it's like not an easy read in the sense that it deals with weird, heavy stuff. But
so like
it is
timey-wimey, Jeremy Bearimy stuff.
It is kind of like that, yeah. But yeah, the final scene of that book or the final chapter, when I read it initially, I thought like, I don't really like this ending. And then I had my chat with Joanna and Jimmy and I came out of it going, no, I feel like that ending is necessary now that I think about it. And it's resonated because I think about it regularly, which is not something I would have thought of.
That's awesome. I really want to read it. I've technically read like the first like 4 pages of The Bone Clocks.
Oh, did you?
and I thought it was interesting, but like, I was just kind of sampling it.
I will say the audio for that one or immersion reading it is really great because the audio has different voices for every single.
Yeah. And it's also free on Audible in Canada.
It is. That's how I listened to it. Yeah. It was really, really great. But yeah, highly recommend it. So yeah, it's just been a weird year in that sense where it's been adventurous, but simultaneously comfort. And just knowing
you reach out and you hate malice, and so you come back and you get some comfort, and then you reach out and you hate Dark Age, and actually you read those back to back, but you know what I mean.
I did, yeah, and that was why I went into my dark cave of misery, and I needed some comfort reads. Yeah, I would agree with this.
I really I wanted to read the Japan book by him. The 1,000 Lives of Jacob did. I don't know how to say, but that book takes place in the time period that I was doing like my last like class dealing with history. I was writing an essay on Japan in that time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it'd be really nice to pair this while I'm like really immersed in reading all these documents about Japan and then like seeing it. But I just never got around to it at the time. But I would really like to read that one. David Mitchell just sounds like an interesting author in general. Also, he I learned some random facts about him recently that I forget now, but he was like a showrunner on one of on Sense8 on Netflix. He was one of the showrunners on the 3rd season, which I just think is wild.
That is strange. Interesting though. I don't know if you've seen that John and his wife Amy did a whole video on David Mitchell. So that might be something worth watching.
Like Talking Story?
Yeah, that you
cool.
jump in before. Yeah, they both love David Mitchell. So
I do know that he loved David Mitchell. I just haven't seen that he did a video with his wife on it.
Yeah, cool. I think she's the one that introduced him to David Mitchell. I could be misremembering that, but they are both very excited to chat David Mitchell pretty much.
Have you just read Bone Clocks or did you read Cloud Atlas?
I just read Bone Clocks. I had Cloud Atlas on my Libby a few months ago, and I was like, I'm not ready because it came in right after Malice and Dark Age, and I was like, this is not the time. This is not the time.
I'm so glad you didn't like Malice. Like, what a wonderful time to be alive.
Right?
It's a love bomb in the sense that I love that you didn't like Malice.
Yeah, Ishiguro. That's another one that I read this year.
So in this top 3, Jimmy, there's Martin, Erickson, and one of these two, or like what is making this the top 3? Or do you mean both of them and Martin? Or is Martin? Martin's not pushed off. That would be insanity.
I don't think so. It's got to be Martin. Got to be Martin. I need to read more Mitchell. I've only been There you go.
Derry read 2 pages of Malice, aka 350 commas, and she decided it was time to quit.
The thing is, both of them are probably
wild, Jimmy, wild.
Good choices, Jimmy. I've said it before, and I'll say it again in regards to Malice. I can see why people like it, and I feel like for me personally, Shad is still in the chat. I know that he disagrees, but I feel like that is a prime example of when a story comes to you in your reading journey. Because if I was a new fantasy reader that had never read an epic fantasy before, I might look at Malice and go, cool, this is really different from anything that I've ever read. But I've read several things like that before. So it just...
You thinking Malice is like Wheel of Time blows my mind. Like, of all the things, it's just not. Like, it's not like there's no similarity. Like, they have the same, like
there's a ton of similarities.
Lynch, but, like, they're just so... Like, it's so much more, like, I don't know. Wheel of Time is just very different world building wise. I think that's the main thing. It was also
different in the sense that I had just finished reading Warlord Chronicles, which Alan just finished re-listening to, which I'm very excited about. But I could see the similarities between Warlord Chronicles and Wheel of Time so clearly in that book that I was having a really hard time focusing on what was actually Malice. And I was like...
Now, I do think it's more similar to Warlord Chronicles, especially because that is a trilogy that inspired John Gwynne.
It is. Which, can we talk about how great Warlord Chronicles is?
Because Warlord Chronicles is so good.
Oh,
I was like seeing someone's reactions to Excalibur, like they were posting on Discord, and it made me realize I don't remember Excalibur very well. Like I remember Winter King and Enemy of God pretty well. I mean, Enemy of God is like just an incredible book.
Yeah.
Are you one of the people who likes Excalibur more?
No, Enemy of God is my favorite.
Okay, yeah, good. So,
but I did
for one series, you like the right one.
So for me, I would say probably 231 in that series because
I agree.
I found that looking back on it retrospectively, I think they're all 5-star books for me. But the beginning of Winter King took me a while to get into.
It takes everybody a while. It's not like I remember reading. I'm sitting there reading the first, and like Cornwell is one of my favorite authors, and I've read a bunch of his books, and I read the first like 100 pages of Winter King. I'm like, do I just like find this mid? Like it's just a bunch of names. Like it's just a bunch of really long, impossible to say names, and they're all related to each other, and they all like they're just like, and he was the cupbearer of this, and the cupbearer's cousin was huff fluff fluff fluff.
Right?
Like, why do I care? And then once like the certain character shows up, then I'm like, all right, this book gets really good.
That's how I felt the exact same time as that when it kicked into gear, and I was like, okay, this is what I needed, but it was just so phenomenal, honestly. Like, I don't think part of I had put it off for reading it for so long was because I was writing an Arthurian-based story and I didn't want to read anyone else's because I didn't want to have any overlapping ideas or themes because I didn't want that present. And I'm so glad I didn't read his first before writing my book, because I would have been like, there's no point in me even writing this, because like there will never be an Arthurian story that will ever be anywhere as good as this. It is so, so, so good. So yeah, I already want to reread it. I probably will reread it in the next few months.
I was just thinking a few months ago that I need to reread. I really want to reread Winter King because I think on reread I will, like, now that I know who everybody is and stuff,
Right.
I think that book will hit a lot better.
I agree.
But I also like need to read more Sharp. Like, I've only read 4 Sharp.
I have read none of the Sharp series
3,000
yet.
of them. So
I haven't read any of the Sharp series yet, but I don't know if that one will be successful for me just based on the time period that it deals with.
Like, do you hate the Napoleon era, or are you just like fine with it?
It's like, I don't know. It's fine at best
like,
for me.
Yeah, I think it's fine as best, but Sharp is a really good character, and like, Cornwell is just a good writer at like making you want to turn the page. Like,
right.
I don't like Sharp nearly as much. Like, I like time period matters to me, but only to a certain point. Like, good writing and characters and stuff matters more. So like the India trilogy with Sharp, I think is really good. And then I read the 4th book, and that was kind of like a sailing book, and I was like, it was okay.
Yeah.
But the narrator of them, Rupert Farley, is really good, so that helps. He's not as good as Jonathan Keeble, but he is really good.
Oh, Jonathan Keeble is so good. Oh, so good. He brought those books to life in a way that was just fantastic.
Yeah, he's one of my goats for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. Him and Stephen Pacey, I would say, are probably my top 2 favorite.
Stephen Pacey, Ray Porter. There's probably a few others I'm obviously blanking on. Dresden guy, James Marsden. No, James Marsden is
James Marsden. Yeah.
James Marsden is Cyclops. James Marsters is.
I don't know. Spike. I have not listened to those books, so I can't.
I know, but who's Spike and I'm gonna look it up. Spike and Buffy.
Oh, that I didn't watch Buffy, so I can't tell you. But James Marsters is what Daniel is saying, and typically he's right about those things. So yeah, I would trust Daniel.
There's too many. There's James Madsen, there's James Marsters, and there's James Madsden. Like, there's too many. It's insane. But anyway, he's very good. One of my favorites.
All right, so we're over 2 hours.
Good chat.
It was a good chat. This is really fun. We'll do it again for sure. You and I chat regularly, so this isn't like abnormal, but we'll schedule it for the channel again. But
it's nice to be on something that I don't have to be so hostile on.
I know, right? It's nice. That's the point of this whole thing, is that you can share things that you enjoy with people. But tell people what you are most excited to read by the end of the year, other than Wind and Truth.
Wind and Truth again.
Yes.
I'm really excited for a lot of books. I feel like I've gotten the groove back of like reading books I really want to read. I'm excited to finish Realm of the Elderlings. I'm excited to read more Guy Gabriel Kay.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read The Shadow of the Wind that people always love and say it's super good.
Exactly.
And, there's probably a few others, but and Midnight Tides. I really want to read Midnight Tides.
Okay. Those are some good choices. You never have to be hostile, Kyle.
I have to be hostile when I'm on a chat that is called frenemies. Okay, I don't make the rules. Look at the rules of life, Derry.
That's fair.
If you look at it, says if thou
are
in a chat called frenemies, thou must be hostile. Like,
thou must be hostile.
Yeah,
that's right. Tell the good people where they can find you, Kyle.
My channel is called Read by Kyle. I'm also on Instagram by the same name, and Goodreads and all that stuff. And
all over Discord, so he's easy to find.
I am less hostile on Discord these days. Okay, I figured it out.
Did you?
Yeah, you just got to add emojis so people don't think you're serious. But for a long time, it was that I was less serious than people thought I was being. So then they would respond, and then that would bring me to here, and then they would, and then we're just all heated. But like at first, I actually was just like joking. So I've gotten a lot better at like faces and stuff.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your Monday night with us. Let us know in the comments down below if you actually prefer Monday nights, because I'm open to switching things up on the channel, because that's always something I can do. If you would like to help support the channel, you can always hit like, subscribe, leave a comment about what you've been reading and loving. If you would like to come hang out in the Patreon Discord, the information for that is also in the box down below. But that's pretty much it on our end. So any final words, Kyle, before we skedaddle on out of here?
Laura's awesome. Stay frosty, folks.
We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.